Let's take another look. Well, you're going to see the snap of the ball. It's low, and then as he goes down, but as he's trying to get it here, you see that knee go. And, Joe, it kind of goes back to the point that you made earlier as far as the conversation or lack thereof that occurred when the injury happened 4 weeks ago between him and between Mike Shanahan and Dr. James Andrews, and whether or not RG3 was at risk playing in this game with that injury.
The later part of that article we talked about earlier, Dr. Andrews was saying, I'm the one that shut him down that day. Finally, I've been a nervous wreck letting him come back as quick as he has. He's doing a lot better this week, but he's still recovering, and I'm holding my breath because of it. That's Dr. Andrews right there in the trench coat and the stocking cap. And simply put, he was talking about Robert Griffin III, saying that he's a compromised player out there, and he is still in the process of healing, while this Redskins organization, for the most part this season, has been flung on his back. They tried to get themselves on his back one more time, and that right knee finally gave out. Take a break.
I hope people will read your work, People's History of Sports in the United States, as well as What's My Name Fool, because I found out a lot of information that I just wasn't informed about. The Washington Redskins, I had heard people comment about the logo and saying this is racist, and so-called Native Americans, they've been protesting and asking for a long time that they change the logo, that they feel it is incredibly disrespectful, and the Redskins have just, no, we're not going to change it moving forward. Your book, you talk about the history of this franchise, and particularly George Preston Marshall. Can you share some of that information with our audience so they get a better idea of how this, the empire of the Redskins was formed?
Well, sure. I mean, you can't understand why we have a team called the Redskins, the most popular sport in the land, without understanding segregation and Jim Crow. Because George Preston Marshall was a segregationist. He owned a team called the Boston Braves. And when he saw he could move the team to Washington, D.C., he also saw that they would then be the southernmost team in the United States. There were no Miami Dolphins back then or Atlanta Falcons. And so he marketed them to the American South. So calling them the Redskins was about minstrelsy.
Wow.
Their fight song, which ends with "Fight for Old D.C.," used to be "Fight for Old Dixie." They were the last team to integrate and only did so under threat from the federal government because it was such an embarrassment to have the only all-white team be where John Kennedy was president, and playing on a federal land grant at that.
Wow. Yeah, all of that information was news to me. I was completely uninformed about all of that, and it made things make a lot more sense in connecting the dots as to why the team has the logo, why they won't change the logo. I grew up close to the D.C. area, so I grew up with a lot of white people around me who were just rabid Redskin fans. It made a lot of things very clear for me when I got that information.
And it's also, that's the end of it is just to say it's a $1 billion brand now. I mean, it tends to flip every year with the Cowboys as to what's the most valuable brand in sports. So we're still just Cowboys and Redskins in this country.
I wish I was in Dixie. Away, away, way down south in Dixie. Bring the niggas with the banjos. Send in the clowns.
Context of White Supremacy. Justice Gusty Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date is Monday, March 11th, 2013, So I have been told. We will be back later in the week. Just check the page for the updates. Definitely doing the study session on Melba Patilla Beal's Warriors Don't Cry. The Little Rock Nine actually is mentioned in the book that we're going to discuss today. We're on the finish line. Tune in this Friday for that, but we should be back before Friday. Just stay tuned, and as always, invest if you think the program is constructive, listener supported. Our meager goal, see if we can do $1,000 minimum for this month. Again, if George Zimmerman can get almost $1 million contributed for killing a black male, I don't think $1,000 is too much minimum. We're about halfway there, so hopefully folks will invest and share. Put links to the program if you've got a web page, a blog. You put it on your Facebook page, Twitter. Share the broadcast if you think it would benefit non-white people, victims of racism, to hear the cows. Our program for today, I guess number one, the sound clips you heard at the beginning, the first segment during the playoff game from this past January between the Washington Redskins, Seattle Seahawks, where Robert Griffin III was injured. Really horrific footage. I wasn't even watching the game. I just clicked on because I'm in the Seattle area and I knew everyone was in a frenzy about the game. I clicked to see what the score was, and at the end I saw he was injured, and I actually just happened to tune in right on the play where he got hurt and ended up having to be carried off the field. It was difficult to watch, but knowing more of what I know about the Redskins franchise made it even more difficult to watch. In fact, I turned from that point. I think I watched for all of 5 minutes, but I watched long enough to get that audio segment. The next piece was author Dave Zirin. He was a guest on the program January of 2010. He's written several books dealing with racism and sports. He was with us that time. He gave some information about the history of the Redskins franchise. Very important, I thought. Not as much information as we'll get today, but that was a great starting point for where we're going to go with the broadcast today. I will again remind folks of how I even found out about our guest for today's program. We were not taking vacations, as I try to do. We were doing our program on December 25th, 2011, and I happened to be in front of a television, and they had a documentary on about the history of black players in the NFL. And they were going, I think they got up to the 60s. I didn't even see the whole thing. I was preparing the broadcast. It just happened to be I was in front of a television that was muted. And when I started watching, they were in the 60s, and they were talking about the Redskins franchise. And they were talking about how the Redskins franchise was very resistant to having black players on the team, and they started going into the history of some of the first black players to be signed to the Redskins and their experience. And so they have Bobby Mitchell on, and he's talking about how he was mistreated, and they've got footage of fans booing, saying all kinds of nasty things, calling him nigger and all this other stuff. And he's talking about how he would score in the end zone, and the fans would be booing it. They'd be playing in D.C., so this would be Redskins fans, ostensibly. He would score, and they would be booing him and yelling stuff, and he would scurry back to the bench. And I mean, just really disgraceful. But as this broadcast continues, this documentary, they have our guest for today's program. He's on it, and he's giving more detail and talking about the fact that he's written a book about all this. And I was thinking, wow, it'd be great to have him on the program. I did not forget, as I said, this was in 2011. I did not forget. It was fine. It took a while, but I was able to track him down, and he said he would be willing to come and share on the program. Our guest is a member of the history program at Nichols College, where he serves as the Robert Stansky Distinguished Professor. He's written several books, including Independent, a biography of Lewis Douglas. He's also written Green Republican, John Saylor, and the Preservation of America's Wilderness. The book we will be discussing today, very interesting read. The title, Showdown, JFK and the Integration of the Washington Redskins. Real pleasure to have him on the broadcast. Looking forward to getting some great information. Joining us live, our guest, Dr. Thomas G. Smith. Dr. Smith, are you with us?
I am here, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for sharing a bit of your time with us. Real pleasure to have you on the program. For starters, if you recall, in case any listeners want to check it out, do you know the documentary film that I'm referencing? Because I said I came in the middle of it, so I don't even know the title of it. Do you know the documentary film that you were a part of?
I know it was produced by CBS Sports, and Third and Long is the title of it. And it's got a subtitle about African Americans in the National Football League. But the official title is Third and Long, meaning it's a long, long way to integration.
Great. Check that out. I would recommend. I didn't even get to see the whole thing, so I'm going to try and see if I can view it in its entirety after the program. But what I saw had a lot of great information and had video of a lot of the stuff and people that we're going to be talking about. Third and Long. Thank you kindly. Is it any information that you think listeners should know about you before we get started? Anything that you think our listeners should know about you, Dr. Smith?
Well, one thing is I'm a Patriots fan. I'm not a Redskins fan. And I'm a sports fan. I'm a avid sports fan, and I'm also a fan of history. So I tried to combine the two interests I have in this latest book about the Washington Redskins.
Right on. I was going to ask if you're a Redskins fan. Actually, when I called the person who helped me to get your contact information, are you in the Massachusetts area?
Yes, I am.
Okay. When I was calling to see if I could get some contact information for you, I called. There are a lot of people who have your name, obviously. I called, and I was incorrect, but the person was actually able to help me to get your contact information. And she was a rabid Redskins fan, and which I found strange. She's in Massachusetts, but she was talking about how much she loved them, and of course she would do anything to help me to get in touch with someone who's written a book about the Redskins. So that was just another odd coincidence along the way. Anywho,
yeah,
you are a white man, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. This program, Context of White Supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system of racism, white supremacy. I use those two terms as synonyms, and I use the same definition for both terms, racism and white supremacy. The definition I use is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you believe that such a system exists, and do you think that is an accurate definition?
I think it exists, but it is not as prevalent as it once was. I think things are getting much better, but we have a long path yet to walk.
Okay. Right on. Let us get started with the book. And I definitely, for listeners, we will definitely make time to get your thoughts on RG3 as well and what happened with all that. But I think that would be better after we've gotten through some of the history of the Redskins. For starters, this book was published in 2011. Why, for listeners out there who would say, why on earth would you publish a book like this, talking about the Redskins and racism within that franchise, or at least the history of racism in that franchise? Why would you publish a book like this in 2011? We've got a black president. Things, as you said, have, at least in your opinion, things have improved. Things have gotten much better. Why did you feel the need to publish Showdown in 2011?
Well, it just so happened to be the 50th anniversary of when the Redskins finally broke through the so-called color barrier and actually hired a black player, Bobby Mitchell. So it's the 50th anniversary, and so I thought it was appropriate to look back and see how this all came about.
Okay. How was the book received? How did people respond to the book? Were people upset about it? Were they intrigued? Was this hashing up old news?
Well, a lot of people liked it. The Washington Redskins, I don't imagine were too happy with it. I didn't interview anyone officially with the Redskins. But it's gotten some excellent press, and it's gotten excellent reviews. It's gotten reviewed in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and Los Angeles Times, and most of the major newspapers have reviewed it very favorably. So it was well received, I would say.
Okay. I guess to start things off, George Preston Marshall, a person who would be the founder, most responsible for the Redskins franchise. What would you start off with anyone who this is their first time hearing about him? Can you give some background on Mr. Marshall?
Yes, he was born in West Virginia. He was a hardcore racist, loved the Confederacy and everything it stood for. He inherited his money, or at least his business, a laundry business, and he was a great self-promoter. He was a great promoter of his business. He was a great promoter of the National Football League and the Washington Redskins. And so he got his money through the laundry business, changed one store into 57 stores, became a multimillionaire, and used his millions to invest in a National Football franchise in 1932. And he went first to Boston, and there he established the Boston Braves, and then they became the Boston Redskins when he moved from Braves Stadium. Remember, there used to be a Boston Braves baseball team. He moved from Braves Stadium to Fenway Park, where the Red Sox played, and changed the name of the team to the Redskins because he had hired a Native American head coach, and so used that as kind of a gimmick, and had some actual Native American football players, and he exploited them by having them dress in headdresses and put on war paint, not just them, but the white players as well, and had them do war dances and put on war paint and all that kind of thing for crowd entertainment. So he was a entertainer, and he was a showman, and he was a man of tremendous ego, and that is basically how he got his start. And he moved to Washington, D.C. in 1936 because his team didn't do very well in Boston, nor did it attract very many fans. So he moved to Washington, D.C., which was his hometown. That's where he went to school. Oddly enough, he went to the same school, prep school, where the Obama children attend, and where the first black player for the Redskins, where his children attended. And so he established his team in Washington in 1936, and 1937 he won a championship. So he thought he had it made. The other thing Marshall did is, as an owner, the National Football League used to hire African American players. Not very many, to be sure, but in the 20s and early 30s, there were a sprinkling of African American players. They weren't banned or barred, but Marshall saw to it in 1934 that blacks were banned from the game, and the other owners agreed. Nothing in writing, of course. It was a so-called quote-unquote gentleman's agreement, just like in baseball. And so from 1934 until 1946, there were no blacks in the National Football League. and that changed shortly after World War II, but Marshall never agreed with the change and resisted until he was forced to change by the Kennedy administration in 1961. There, I went on too long.
Oh, not at all. I definitely appreciate the details. A couple things I want to touch on before moving forward. Number one, I think one of the very first things you said about George Preston Marshall, he was a racist white supremacist. That's undisputed. That's not anything where you would have people saying, "Oh, well, that's not true," or "There's no evidence," that you're libeling someone who's deceased. In your view, that is undisputable. George Preston Marshall, racist.
Yes, and I think there are three smoking guns that show that. One is he never hired a black player until he was forced to. Secondly is in his will, he gave his money to whatever it was, let's say $5 million, to help disadvantaged children, so long as, guess what, so long as that money did not go to help black children. So any organization that believed in integration or helping black kids could not receive money from the so-called Redskins Foundation. And the third evidence I guess I would use is not anything, of course, that I heard, but from the evidence, his language using racist epithets shows that he was a racist as well.
Right on. Very important in my view. The second thing, you talked about how originally the franchise being in Boston, they were the Boston Braves. He changes the name to the Redskins. He hires William Dietz, hope I'm saying his name correctly, William Dietz. And this person, Mr. Dietz, who's going to coach the team, says he, Native American, believed himself to be so. That was under some dispute. You talk about that in the book. I think that is important because you do have a long legacy of white people claiming to be or alleging to be Native American when there's some benefit, when there's something that can be reaped from them being identified or classified, accepted as so-called Native American, and this was something that was disputed and can't really be resolved. He's obviously passed. He can't do any DNA testing or what have you, but this is something that you talk about in the book, correct?
Correct, yeah. He always claimed he was Native American, this guy named Dietz, nicknamed Lone Star Dietz. But like you say, there's no DNA evidence. He didn't have any offspring that we know of, so that we can't really tell whether he was Native American or not. But for the most part, when Dietz was around in the early 30s, there weren't very many benefits by claiming you were Native American, unlike, maybe there are more benefits today, but back in the 30s there weren't very many benefits by claiming you were Native American. So I believe that he was.
Okay. I would even pick, with regards to George Preston Marshall and all of the having the players dress in Indian headgear and what have you. In my view, that would be another, in my view, blatant act of racism. There started to be a lot of that, even continues to this day. In my view, it's racist and it's necrophilic for a group of people that have been genocided, slaughtered, to then have white people, in my view, just making a mockery. Their traditions, their customs, making a mockery of it, naming mascots and entertainment teams, sporting teams, naming them after different groups of Native Americans. In my view, that's another blatant act of racism for someone who you say was all about entertainment, gimmicks, showmanship to get press, to get attention, and to market his teams. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, and that's what he would. He would stoop to just about anything, including the black minstrel, the blackface stuff, for halftime entertainment during his shows in Washington, D.C. when he had the Redskins too. So he claimed that he didn't want to exploit people, but he certainly exploited Native Americans.
Just before moving on, George Preston Marshall, we're talking about someone who was one of the charter members of the NFL Hall of Fame and who had his hand in a lot of the innovations, things that I think a lot of people take for granted about the NFL. Just reading your book, learning about how he changed the forward pass and changed where the goalposts are, and was one of the first people working to get referees full-time employed, to make NFL officials full-time employees. We're talking about someone who had a major hand in making the NFL what it is today, correct?
That is correct. And division play, having the leagues divided into division with a championship game, that was Marshall. A Pro Bowl, that was Marshall. And perhaps he gets most of the credit for bringing national football into the television age. He was the first one to see the real possibilities of television. Of course, he had the entire quote-unquote Dixie market to himself for a long time, but he saw the revenue aspects of television long before other people did. So that's why he's in the Hall of Fame, mainly because of the rule changes and modernizing football in terms of TV revenue.
Okay. Also, in your book, major hands in contributing to ceasing the practice of hiring players, as you called it, the gentleman's agreement. Great film, by the way, not about football, but great film, also talking about racism, gentleman's agreement, late 40s.
Right. Yeah.
They did hire, as you said, a minimal number, other teams, not the Redskins, but some teams they did hire a minimal number of black players for a time, but then stopped. Some of the passages in the book, you talk about how this was disputed and different people saying, oh, well, that's not so. There's no agreement. We don't have any problem hiring black players. But mysteriously, there just happened to be no black players for, I think it was about 12 years, from the early 1930s through the 1940s. And they took, in my view, which you talk about in the book, taking some of the coaches, some of the league officials, taking a very paternalistic, racist attitude about this and saying, well, we don't want to hire these black players because we're looking out for their best interest. When we hire a black player, other teams really have it in for them, really have it in for us. It just causes a lot of problems, and we don't want to subject them to this being the excuse given as to why they did not want any black players on their team, or one of the excuses given as to why they did not want or did not have any black players on their roster. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate, and they even went so far as to say we're protecting them from, because if they played with whites, Southern white boys would disable them, or perhaps even worse, the white boys wouldn't play football, and so they went out of their way to try to quote unquote protect blacks from getting injured by white violence and abuse, which was a crock, obviously. And Marshall, even, when the guy drafted players, he would pass up a highly touted black player just so that he could sign a white player from a Southern college because it resonated with his Dixie fan base. And it ended up costing him in terms of wins and losses.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
In the 1957 draft, the Redskins had the possibility of picking Jim Brown, perhaps the greatest running back in professional history, or Jim Parker, the greatest offensive lineman in pro football history, passed on them both because they were black and signed a white fullback from the University of Miami who never played a game. He was white.
But he was white.
Yes.
On page 37, just to further that point, because I put that in the description, George Preston Marshall, valuing racism, white supremacy above and beyond even winning and picking the best players, whatever they happen to be, to win. This is on page 37 in your book, to even go back earlier than Jim Brown. You write, in the late 1930s, the University of California at Los Angeles, UCLA, had 3 minority athletes with NFL potential: Robinson, Jackie Robinson, Strode, and Washington. A transfer student from Pasadena City College, Jackie Robinson was a year behind Strode and Washington, class of 1940. NFL owners had a chance to sign the cyclone-gated Helian long before he broke baseball's color barrier in 1947. At UCLA, he was the only athlete ever to letter in 4 sports: baseball, football, basketball, and track. He was the national champion in the long jump, the leading basketball scorer in the Pacific Coast Conference, and still holds the school football record for the highest average per carry in a season, 12.2 yards in 1939. The assistant coach at Stanford University referred to him as just about the best sprinter on the coast, and he's a great ball carrier. He's rugged and can play just as hard and long as anyone. We're scared to death of him. Robinson appeared in the college all-star game in Chicago in 1941, but the NFL passed him by. In those days, no major football or basketball clubs hired black players. The only job offered me was with the Honolulu Bears, Robinson recalled. I think that is extraordinary on so many levels. Just, again, to highlight racism, white supremacy being valued over even picking extraordinary Hall of Fame, once-in-a-lifetime athletes who could obviously help your team be successful and win games, which is what this is supposed to be all about, winning games. And the fact that it was not just George Preston Marshall. No one in the NFL selected Jackie Robinson or any of these other qualified athletes during the 1930s, and this even continued on into the 40s.
Yeah, it's amazing. And when they finally did in 1946, like Kenny Washington was pretty much over the hill. He wasn't the player he was, 5 years earlier, and a knee injury ruined his career. And, of course, Robinson had signed a minor league baseball contract to play with the Montreal team for the Dodgers, and then played for the Dodgers in 1947 at the major league level. Strode eventually played, but he too he didn't play during his peak years. They waited too long on these guys. And Kenny Washington and Jackie Robinson and Woody Strode were just amazing players. And the only real break for a lot of the black players came with the NFL competitor, the American All-American Football Conference, Cleveland Browns. They did sign some black players, especially Marion Motley, who was one of the greatest running backs in pro football history, and the Cleveland Browns' success was just sobering for some of the NFL owners, not all, and not George Marshall, unfortunately.
Context of white supremacy. Also with Jim Brown, just the magnitude. Always try to emphasize this with regards to how big a problem white supremacy, racism is. As you mentioned, George Preston Marshall also passed on Jim Brown, who was in the Hall of Fame and arguably one of the greatest football players of all time, certainly one of the greatest running backs of all time. In the documentary film, Jim Brown, All-American, done by Spike Lee, Jim Brown says that he almost quit playing football at Syracuse before he even got to the Cleveland Browns. He almost quit because of racism. When he first got there, he didn't get a lot of playing time and was subject to the same sort of abuses and what have you. And he says that he almost quit that freshman year just because it was so tough for him with white people practicing racism against him because they said he was a black person. And just to emphasize, for me at least, the magnitude of that, when you have somebody who is one of the best football players of all time to be extraordinarily talented at what you do, and racism can make that mean absolutely nothing. So what? You're really good at this. So what? We're more interested in practicing racism, just astounding. Jim Brown ultimately had his number, retired at Syracuse. I've been to Syracuse and seen they have a huge shrine where he was also one of the best lacrosse players of all time while he was at Syracuse. I think that gets left out a lot as well. In the book, you talk about with Jackie Robinson, World War II was such a massive interruption for sports and the country in general. This is on page 66 in your book. You write, I want to read exactly what you wrote. You say, when the United States entered World War II, African Americans were hesitant to lend their support and involvement. What do you mean when you say African Americans were hesitant to lend their support and involvement?
To the war effort, because first of all, they couldn't join an integrated army. The military was completely segregated. So why sign up if you have to serve in a segregated unit under white officers? So and plus, you've got racism at home. Why go overseas to fight racism in Europe when you've got racism at home? And that's why some African American newspapers said that we're fighting a two-front war, one at home against racism and one overseas. So, they were hesitant. I mean, not only were the troops segregated, but the blood supplies were segregated. Even though blood plasma was invented by a black man, the Red Cross segregated the blood for the wounded. So, it was a tough decision for blacks. But some of them joined because they thought by joining they could perhaps make things better for their children and grandchildren and future generations. So it's real tough. That's why they were hesitant.
I don't know, when I read that, and this, I remember even some of the programs that we've done, Black Soldier Blues, which is a phenomenal documentary film detailing the experience of many black veterans during World War II who were stationed in Australia, and talking about racism that they experienced there, and even some of the black males being hung and killed under suspicious allegations that they had done something incorrect with white women. When I read that, I just thought, wow, black people have a long legacy of serving in the armed forces in this area of the world, not just in World War II, but Civil War, really any of the conflicts you want to pick, the American Revolution, a long history of serving, and just that the word hesitant. I totally understand your point about many black people certainly looking at this and realizing, wait a minute, this is really hypocritical for us to be going over here fighting and dying in the name of democracy and fighting against Hitler and his racist white supremacist regime while we're facing racism at home. But I think there's a ton of evidence that you had a lot of black people who didn't hesitate. They signed up immediately, and I think a lot of black people, I've heard this refrain over and over again, said, yes, we should serve immediately. Jackie Robinson even, we should serve immediately. We should enlist. This is one of the ways that we can prove that we are Americans, that we're dedicated, we're committed to this country. And this is one of the ways that we can prove we are worthy of correct treatment. I think you had a lot of black people. They didn't hesitate at all, even though they certainly understood what you point out. Just that word hesitate kind of stuck with me. I felt like, I don't know, there could have been a better word selection, different word selection. A lot of black people didn't hesitate to enlist at all.
Well, that's true. That's true. I just meant I probably could have worded it much better. I just thought that some, I didn't think, I know some did hesitate. And even some black newspapers in their editorials it was a catch-22 for them. On the one hand, they want to show that they're patriotic. On the other hand, why, when they're just going to be, doing essentially menial labor and not being in an integrated fighting unit. Why bother?
Absolutely. Let's see here. This is on page 72. I reckon I should give out the number. I know we do have a lot of folks that were excited about hearing more about the Redskins and sports and racism. If you have questions, you would like to dial in, our guest, Dr. Thomas G. Smith. The number to dial is 760-569-7676. And the code is 564-943#. Press *6 if you have questions. Dial in. Let's see. So this is on page 72 in Showdown. You write. Make sure I got my notes. Okay. African Americans denounce the lack of opportunity in professional sports. For them, the desegregation of Major League Baseball during the 1930s and 1940s was of ultimate importance. The national pastime was extremely popular among minority athletes, and dozens of qualified blacks played in the Negro Leagues. Unlike football, however, blacks had never participated in Major League Baseball in the 20th century. Indeed, when professional football was desegregated during the early 1930s, minority writers condemned baseball for being the only national sport that bars race players. Even after the color barrier was established in professional football, blacks were slow to attack it because they were reluctant to admit that it existed. I thought that was profound on many levels. What do you mean when you say that blacks were slow to attack the ban, the racist ban to keep black players out because they were reluctant to admit that it existed?
Well, I think they knew that it existed in Major League Baseball, but in football, I'm not sure that most black players did understand that there was an unwritten rule in football as well as baseball, and that's why I think they were hesitant.
What evidence leads you to that conclusion that black players, that they did not understand that they were not going to be picked to play in professional football because of racism?
Well, for one reason, there were hardly any mainstream colleges did not recruit blacks. Now, there were some exceptions. And if they went to a black school, pro football didn't scout black colleges to any large degree, if at all. And so I think that baseball just dwarfed national football in terms of popularity, and I think their focus was on baseball more than professional football. I think that's just the way it was. Are you still there?
Oh, yes, sir. I can hear you. There was some interference that happened for a couple seconds.
Oh,
but yeah,
okay.
I could hear your response. That I found it fascinating because that's something we talk about on the broadcast on a pretty regular basis, and that is black people, the victims, the targets of racism, white supremacy, not understanding or not being aware that racism exists, that even that they're being victimized by it, and that was profound to me. This was going on for years. I think they discontinued the practice of at least having a few black players in the NFL early on in the 30s. So you're talking more than a decade going by. Even if it's not popular, if you're paying attention at all to the NFL and you're not seeing any black players, and particularly at this time, black people are still being lynched on a regular basis all across the country during the 1930s and 1940s. That is just astounding to me that they would be confused about what's going on, particularly since there's a pattern of this. It's not like this is just the NFL. I'm not even saying that you're incorrect. That very way could it be. That is astounding to me that they didn't understand that's what was happening. It's racism, and they're just not picking any black players.
I don't have a better explanation than that.
I don't either. I just want to get that out. I don't either. Like I said, I'm not even saying you're incorrect. That just.
And the other thing is, even when blacks could play in the NFL in the 40s, they could go to games and see the Redskins play other teams with blacks, but the Redskins never had any. And so, I asked some African Americans, why didn't you just not go to the games? Why didn't you boycott the games more than you did? And this gentleman said to me, well, whites go to see black entertainers, blacks go to see white entertainers, and besides, blacks go to see the Redskins get defeated by the teams with black players. So that made a lot of sense to me.
That was another one that stood out. You talk about that pretty frequently in the book in terms of even well before the Redskins had any black players, that they had a black fan base where black people would go to the games, and the Redskins, once they moved to D.C., they did not have segregated seating for the fans. Is that correct?
That's correct. For either baseball or football.
Okay, so that major difference that even way on down the road after the 40s and 50s, you still had some other teams in professional sports that did have quote-unquote segregated seating where black people were crammed over into one section. I think when I was reading in the book, you were talking about with the senators that they commented, I guess one of the racist people that was doing the color commentary for the game said that, the ball went into the foul section, and he said it went into the coal pile where there was some...
Yeah, I think that was in the late 20s when that happened, but it might have been the early 1930s. I forget exactly when that happened. But that's what the announcer said. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, that just really stuck out to me, and I see what some of the black people told you with regards to we're going to see the Redskins in the hope that they lose, or because they might be playing an opponent who had black players, and we want to go and support them and cheer for them. And even Jim Brown, some of these other athletes talked about that when they played the Redskins. They wanted to do well because they knew they were not going to hire any black players for the Redskins. That just you're still supporting a racist organization, George Marshall, racist white supremacist. You're giving him your money every time that you go through the gate. It really stood out as quite odd. Not criticizing the black people who chose to go, and some of them just saying, hey, this is our only entertainment option. What else is it that you're going to do for entertainment if you're not going to support the Redskins? Just wow. Really try to be cautious about giving money to people who have a total disregard for black people. Just that repeated theme in the book, something that comes up over and over again.
But Marshall would portray himself as very progressive because not only could black people go to the games, but he would hire black people to be vendors and clean up, the trash and all that kind of stuff. So Marshall thought he was very progressive doing that because some ballparks didn't even hire blacks for janitorial or menial tasks. So, Marshall just was totally out of it.
In my view, I wouldn't say he's quote unquote out of it. I would say that is a convenient excuse for someone who is racist if they don't want to admit it, if they just don't want to tell the person, yes, I'm racist and this is how I feel about black people. And it reminds me, one of our previous guests on the program, we've had quite a few programs talking about racism in sports. He wrote a book called Darwin's Athletes. And in his book, he talked about how it is, you can be racist And you can still enjoy going to see black athletes. In Marshall's case, that wasn't his plan, but you could be a racist and still have black vendors and still have or allow seating that is not segregated, quote unquote, in the stadium. And I think you call this out in the book, where I don't see black people being smart. I don't see black people being scientists, high-level thinkers, managers. I don't see them in that capacity. I'm okay with them being in some sort of menial position where they're doing custodial work, where they're selling a hot dog or two. Fine, they can sit wherever they want to at the games, what have you, and I'm making money off that, by the way. But I do not see them in management position. I don't see them being a coach of a team, a general manager, even since we're talking about the D.C. area. I don't see them in high positions of government. That this is not something that contradicts someone who has racist thinking at all to do some of the things that Marshall did.
Yeah, I think that's on target. Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Again, talking about the book Showdown, JFK, and the integration of the Washington Redskins, haven't even got to the whole conflict that plays out in the 1960s. One of the things Pete Rozelle, commissioner for the National Football League, what is your view with regards to why he didn't do more to pull George Marshall along and make him hire a few black players along the way, particularly after some of the other ball clubs started to have at least a minimal number of black players on their roster?
Well, I think Rozelle came in as commissioner, I may be a year or two off here, but like 1960. So he was pretty fresh to the job. And he was, I think, intimidated a little bit by some of the old boys network, mainly Marshall and George Halas and Art Rooney of the Steelers. And I think he was a little timid to begin with. And I think what finally turned Rozelle around is this might screw up our TV deal. Having this argument with the Kennedy administration and having this racist owner of the Redskins, it doesn't play well with our television advertisers. And so I think it was mainly an economic argument that brought Rozelle around more than it was a social justice argument. So I think he did it mainly for economic reasons.
Okay. Before we get into what happened with the Kennedy administration and their involvement with the Redskins, two quick things. Number one, just kind of rewinding, a lot of black people going to support the Redskins once they moved to the D.C. area, supporting them, going to their games, even when they had their training camp in California near Occidental College, black people going to support those games as well. How long were the Redskins, how long did they have this tradition of the halftime shows with the minstrel performances and blackface and that sort of thing? How long did they have that as a staple aspect of Redskins entertainment?
That was mainly in the 1930s, but they always had some kind of halftime entertainment, always, because Marshall loved the halftime entertainment. He loved his band. And he loved his marching song, but I think the minstrel stuff, that pretty much ended in the 30s, early 30s.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the late 30s.
Were they still playing Dixie as?
Oh yeah, they played Dixie. Oh, they played Dixie right up until I think it was like 1960.
1960. Okay. And in your view, why was that such an integral aspect of the team? Even the fight song, George Preston Marshall, his wife, when she originally wrote the lyrics, it was supposed to be Fight for Old D.C. He changed it to Fight for Old Dixie. What is the significance of that song?
Oh, I think it's appealing to the Southern ex-Confederate, noble cause, Civil War, white segregationists. I think that's pretty clear. That's what he was angling towards, that would appeal to radio listeners and fans that go to the buy the tickets. I think this is clearly a segregationist ploy. I think it's evident.
We play that song on the pro. I've been playing it regularly because I think that is just a core aspect in the system of white supremacy, the significance, the importance of that song, just how often it's played. If anyone, I would say go watch that documentary film, Ghosts of Ole Miss. You will hear about 20 different versions of Dixie, and I think they still play it today at Ole Miss's games, even though they've done away with Colonel Reb and some of the more, I would say, more blatant, obvious racist symbols that they have attached to the school and the football team and everything. I think even to and I've never been to an Ole Miss football game, so I could be wrong, but I think they still do. I've heard people that have gone to games, as recently as 2012 and what have you, and they said they still play it at the games, and that right there is saying a lot. I think it's undisputable what that song is connected to. I think white people understand. They know what that song is all about, the history of what that song is connected to.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean it was written in 1861, I think, as a theme song for the Confederacy. So yeah, and the Confederacy's defense of slavery. So sure.
Context of white supremacy. Moving to the 60s and the showdown that happened, I thought in the book I appreciated the fact that you called attention to the fact that John F. Kennedy, it's not like this somebody who was barnstorming once he won office and is in the White House in 1961. It's not like this is somebody who was out on the front lines battling against racism, white supremacy, and talking about his half-hearted efforts with the Freedom Riders to protect them, and even saying, hey, why don't you guys just cool this out, stop all this. We really do not need this global embarrassment of racists beating black and white people just for attempting to ride on a bus and go to a bus station in different areas of the country. And even prior to that, before he gets to office with Eisenhower and what happened with the Little Rock Nine, can you talk about why the Kennedy administration and the Secretary of Interior, Stuart Udall, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, why they chose to be involved in getting some black players on the Redskins to begin with?
Well, I think Kennedy did it during the 60 campaign because he was campaigning for African-American votes. He knew he was in a very close election with Richard Nixon, and black voters may have tipped the balance in Kennedy's favor. So he made civil rights promises on the campaign trail that he did, I think, for political reasons to get the black vote. And then once he was elected to office, I think he was embarrassed. Kennedy's main attention as president was always foreign policy and how the United States could win the Cold War against Russia, especially among developing nations in Africa especially. And how can you win over Africans if you are segregating blacks in the United States, if you are not allowing them to sit in Washington, D.C. restaurants or Maryland restaurants or Virginia restaurants. It's an embarrassment. And so I think he did it, first of all, for votes, and second of all, for foreign policy reasons. It was a Cold War weapon that the Russians could use against us. The communists were less racist, perhaps, than the good guys. And so Kennedy saw that, and it didn't play well with him. And I think the third reason was that he thought it was the right thing to do, but he just didn't want to offend Southern members of Congress, and they were generally old geezer types that controlled committees. And Kennedy didn't push very hard on civil rights because he was afraid of offending them, and they would torpedo legislation, especially foreign policy legislation, that he wanted. So he was afraid to push too hard, but yet he had made these promises about civil rights and social justice, and so he tried to play it down the middle. And he came out with this executive order, the President's Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity, I think it was called, so that the federal government would not discriminate against African Americans, and neither could businesses doing business with the federal government. Now, Stuart Udall, who was in charge of the Interior Department, mainly, natural resources, national parks, that kind of thing, I think Udall, I'm writing a biography of Udall, and Udall is very progressive on civil rights going back to World War II and the 1950s. He was, as a member of Congress, he was a champion of civil rights, of school integration. And so Udall was a hardcore liberal in terms of civil rights. And once he got to the cabinet position, he took Kennedy's President's Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity seriously and decided to move against Marshall. And another reason he did it, he was a football fan and saw that the Redskins were pathetic on the football field, and so he issued this letter to Marshall saying, integrate the team. You've got yourself a brand new stadium, publicly financed. It sits on public land, which Udall, as Secretary of the Interior, was landlord over. So it's the taxpayers' land, it's the taxpayers' stadium, and so he used that Kennedy Committee on Equal Opportunity to say, all right, you've got to hire some black players. And he gave Marshall a deadline by the end of 1961, and Marshall tried to play hardball and ended up losing. So it was Kennedy, it was Udall, much more than Kennedy, who issued this challenge to Marshall. And so Marshall resisted for a while, and Marshall came up with all kinds of excuses, who the hell is the federal government to tell me how to run my business, other teams have blacks, why does it matter, if the Redskins don't have any, and are you also going to force the Army football team to integrate, Washington University, are you going to force them to integrate? And he kind of originally kind of laughed it off and thought he was going to get away with it, and he didn't. And the showdown came in 1962 when Udall said, okay, I'll give you a year to use the stadium, and if after that year you don't hire a black player, you won't be able to use this stadium. And Marshall eventually caved and drafted a black player, and that black player, of course, was Ernie Davis, the Heisman Trophy winner, who also went to Syracuse University like Jim Brown.
This is on page 156. Give a little bit more background. You write, Kenneth Keating, a Republican senator from New York, contrasted the White House's strong action against the Redskins with its lackadaisical approach to the protection of the Freedom Riders in Alabama. I cannot help but feel that Alabama Governor George Faubus and his cohorts need a little more attention than George Preston Marshall and company, he declared on the floor of the U.S. Senate. The Redskins may be tough on a football field, but the administration apparently has decided that they are easy targets in the political arena. Kennedy's reluctance to combat racial injustice in America aggressively distressed civil rights leaders. His selection of Harris Woolford, a white lawyer, as his top civil rights advisor was scorned in an editorial in the Washington Afro-American. It referred to Woodard as an apostle of delay. If JFK wanted advice on civil rights, it continued he should contact a prominent black leader like Adam Clayton Powell, Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, or A. Philip Randolph. We don't need any Mr. Harris Woodford speaking for us in this arena. Thank you. And the less he advises, the happier we will be. The more when I continued to read, surprisingly, I found myself leaning to the people who were saying, hey, why is he picking on the Redskins and Marshall with all of the problems we're having with regards to racism, white supremacy, and all areas of people activity? Why are they picking on the Redskins of all franchises where you've got literally black people being killed in the streets with impunity by racists? Why in the world would we go to Redskins and say, well, this is the battle that we're going to take up, even though, as you're saying, Secretary of Interior Stuart Udall really pushing this, but Kennedy backing him and saying, yes, this is something that we can get behind. You go on, this is on page 160, where you go into some of the details about this. You write, conservatives interpreted the desegregation order as an unwarranted intrusion by big government, one which threatened democracy and free enterprise. An aggrieved Redskins fan asked Attorney General Robert Kennedy to halt the harassment of private businessmen by the Cowboy and the New Frontier Rodeo. If Mr. Marshall doesn't want any Negro players on his team, that's his business, declared a Tulsa World editorial. Others preferred to allow the hidden hand of economics to play out. If Marshall continued to field a team of poor quality, fans would stop attending the games and he would be forced to hire blacks. For some conservatives, federal interference in professional sports smacked of communism, and they accused Udall of trying to become a sports commissar. Another critic believed that in the near future, federal officials would be dictating where Americans would work. And a Cold War conscious citizen feared that it would somehow make the nation susceptible to a takeover by Premier Nikita Khrushchev. Once government sticks its icky fingers into free business, there is a hole in the line big enough for Mr. K to smash through and rack up a winning score for his team. Others accused Udall of holding a double standard. Why would he allow segregated George Washington University football team to play in D.C. Stadium, but not the Redskins? Why didn't he take action to prevent segregated seating at the home games of the Houston Oilers, the only professional team with segregated seating? You go on to give some of the responses that they gave to that, the Kennedy administration saying that they didn't have control over what the seating at the Houston Oilers football games, that this is something that they could control because the Redskins were playing on a land-grant stadium. Can you also give some of the detail, because you give a lot of just phenomenal quotes about the role that the black press played in covering this ordeal and even pressuring to help get black players in the league. Can you talk about their role in this crisis as well?
Yeah, I think they were very important, especially the guy that whose name just escaped me, that wrote for the Baltimore Afro-American. He was just tremendous. Wrote for the Baltimore Afro-American for 40 years.
Sam Lacey?
Sam Lacey. Sam Lacey was just terrific in bringing attention to Marshall's poor record on civil rights. And so were some black writers in California, where Marshall played charity games and exhibition games, and they encouraged California African Americans to boycott his games out there. And I think that really shocked Marshall, that this black energized protest movement might just ruin things for him. So I think they played a very important grassroots role, and I think I would, had I had a chance to write the book again, I think I would emphasize their role a little bit more than I did in the book, because I think it was extremely important.
I was stunned. I hadn't read about some of these folks. I know we were just that last program, we were talking about Mr. Wilbon and his $40 million slave, and he popped up right here, Michael Wilbon, talking about what an influence Sam Lacy had on this. As a matter of fact, I will read exactly what you said. This is on page 114. According to journalists Michael Wilbon, Shirley Povich, and Sam Lacy were the clearest and sharpest voices in demands for racial justice on and off the field. Both men were gracious, unassuming, and approachable. Both were devoted husbands and fathers. Both were dedicated to their newspapers, worked into their 90s, and contributed columns just before dying. Both were inducted into the Writers' Wing of the Baseball Hall of Fame, having access to the cultural memories of both icons, wrote Wilbon, having access to the cultural memories of both icons, wrote Wilbon, was the sports writing equivalent of having Babe Ruth and Josh Gibson alive and well, writing, reporting, teaching, mentoring right up until the time they died. They are the only men before whom I genuflect as an adult. In fact, I will read a little bit more just to recognize Sam Lacy. John Jake Oliver, publisher of the Baltimore Afro-American, where Lacy worked for nearly 60 years, called him the father of modern-day African-American sports writers. He served as a role model and inspiration for Wilbon, Ralph Wiley, Robin Roberts, William Roden, and dozens of others. William Roden actually authored $40 Million Slave, a Lacy protege before moving to the New York Times. Roden recalled his first day of work at the Afro-American. He arrived at 8:30 a.m., early by his reckoning, but discovered that Lacy, always dressed in a coat and tie, had been there for 3 hours, as was his custom. This was my introduction to a journalism work ethic, Roden wrote in a Lacy tribute. Someone asked whether Sam showed me the ropes, but he essentially told me that there were no ropes, just a long, hard road littered with challenges. If you have one great mentor in your life, consider yourself lucky. I was blessed I had Sam Lacy. All of that on page 114. They just had some really wonderful observations, in my opinion, some of the things, and did a great job of calling out the racism. Is this material archived? Is it easy to access, some of the stuff that you got from the black press?
No, it's not easy to access. It's mainly on microfilm, and not every college has it. I found it in various university libraries on microfilm, so I had to do some digging, and unfortunately, it's not easily accessed yet. Although I've heard that some of that stuff is going to be digitized, and maybe it'll be available online, but to my knowledge, it's not yet. Yeah, Sam Lacy's one of those guys where I've never heard anybody say anything bad about him. He's just a wonderful human being.
Wow. This is, and I mean, him being in the Baltimore area, he's bird's eye view on what's going down with the DC sports franchises. Just a tad more. This is on 115 in the chapter Black Blitz, talking about the civil rights movement and black people working hard against the system of white supremacy. You write, this is again 115. During the Washington Senators baseball season, Lacy worked at Griffith Stadium as a batting practice ball retriever, vendor, general errand runner for the players. Like his father, he became an avid fan of the Senators, but being a black fan came with indignities, like having to sit in segregated seating in right field, or having to listen to Arch McDonald, a racially insensitive Senators radio broadcaster, saying, "There goes one into the coal pile." when a home run or foul ball was hit into the black seating section. On another occasion, during a parade for the Senators before the 1924 World Series, Sam's father stood on a street corner displaying a badge given to him years earlier by Walter Johnson. It read, "I saw Walter Johnson pitch his first game in 1907. A passing Senators pitcher Nick Aldrock looked at Lacey Sr. and spit in his face." The humiliating incident, however, did not keep father and son from Senators games. There that is again. One thing I never quite figured out about my father, Lacey wrote in his autobiography, Fighting for Fairness, was why he refused to go see the all-white Redskins play but was a regular in the Jim Crow Pavilion to take in games of the all-white Senators. Historian Brad Snyder in Beyond the Shadow of the Senators says that the elder Lacey grew weary of the Senators' ban against blacks and stopped attending games in 1946. That is just astounding to me. I cannot, and yeah, I'm not criticizing the victims here at all. I cannot imagine having to endure things like that, and particularly having to pay money. If it was free, I would still have a difficulty, but I could kind of go with okay if you just want to see if you really like baseball or you're rooting for them to lose or what have you, but you have to pay to go and deal with these sort of insults and just racist abuses. Mind-boggling. Yeah. Anywho, so back to the whole fight to get some actual black players on the Redskins. You have some phenomenal photographs in the book, and you actually have a picture of racists in Nazi regalia protesting and saying that you're not going to make our beloved George Preston Marshall hire any Negroes on his team. Was there a lot of this sort of response from white Redskins fans?
I don't know whether a lot is the right word, but certainly there was, at the time, something called the American Nazi Party, and they certainly were opposed to the integration of the Washington Redskins, and I think there was considerable non-Nazi whites who were also opposed and carried signs. And I've come across other rallies by whites supporting Marshall, but obviously the most dramatic and the most glaring and the most offensive was seeing Nazis with their swastika armbands there carrying signs saying keep Redskins white. It's just unbelievable that this was, to me, still going on in 1961 and 1962. It's just, and I show that picture sometimes to my students, and they are just astounded that this could happen. Of course, 1960s to my students was the olden days, but it wasn't to me.
Well, I would tell folks during the 1960s, again, unfortunately, you still have black people being killed in the streets with impunity. Medgar Evers, for one, amongst others, being killed with impunity. So it shouldn't, if you have an understanding, it shouldn't be that surprising that you have white people who were more than willing to come out and publicly voice their disapproval for bringing any Negroes on a black or on a professional sports team. Okay, so this gets serious. Mr. Udall has said, you're playing on a stadium, land grant stadium. We have authority here. You're going to have to get some black players on your team. He specifically, they're looking at the draft for the 1961 draft coming up, saying, hey, you all had better draft some black players. If you're not willing to get some black players on the team, there's going to be a problem. Eventually, Marshall, he talks to his lawyers and says, at first he denies that they're racist, which in my view is standard racist operating procedure to say, hey, we're not racist. We've never been about racism. We always just pick the best player. What are you all talking about in the first place? And they're not going to tell us what to do. They eventually go into the draft. What ultimate decisions do they make at that 1961 draft?
Oh, in the 1961 draft, Marshall knew he was going to have to cave and draft a black player. So he decided to send somebody else and do the so-called dirty deed. He didn't even go himself, and he usually always did. So he sent his general manager to draft Ernie Davis. And there was also a danger for George Marshall that he would be asked to have a photo opportunity with a black person, which he never did. So he sent his general manager out, and they drafted Ernie Davis, number one. And then Marshall decided that he probably couldn't sign Ernie Davis because then there was the rival American Football League, and the AFL was after Davis also. And so Marshall decided that he probably couldn't meet Davis's salary demands, or at least he couldn't match the AFL's offer, so he traded Davis to the Cleveland Browns for one of their draft picks and Bobby Mitchell, who was an established African-American player who just every time he played the Redskins just humiliated them with spectacular performances. And so he traded Ernie Davis, and Ernie Davis was traded obviously to the Cleveland Browns, never played a game. He got sick, he got leukemia, died in 1963, and Bobby Mitchell for the Redskins became a superstar, flanker, one of the best ever to play the game. So, the racist Marshall lucked out with that trade.
This is 176. You're right. I think this would be another act. George Preston Marshall practicing racism. You write that Ron Hatcher, the 8th round draft choice from Michigan State, not Davis, became the first African American to sign a contract with the Redskins. Hatcher downplayed its racial significance. To me, this is just a job, he declared. Nothing else. It is a challenge, yes, but a challenge only in the sense that every new step is a challenge. Nearly always a lightning rod, Marshall brought controversy to the signing ceremony by refusing to be photographed with Hatcher. He did not want to exploit the situation, he said, and instructed Coach McPeak to pose with Hatcher instead. Besides being a racist, Marshall seemed to have opposed the invitation to be photographed with Hatcher because he did not want to bring more attention to the 25 years of Redskins racial bigotry. Marshall's sudden act of tender concern over exploitation brought yet another public rebuke from Shirley Povich. Marshall, he asserted, was a promoter who had made a career of exploiting not only football players, but laundries, auto races, basketball teams, state fairs, radio, TV, and even the Southern Confederacy, none of them shyly. Still, he continued, Marshall should be commended for yielding to White House pressure to sign an African-American player. It could be the beginning of better football for Washington fans and is certainly the beginning of a more dignified football situation here. Whether Davis or Hatcher or both make good is not of the utmost importance. More wholesomeness has been attained. They also had Bobby Mitchell. They actually had several. I think it was 5 players on the roster for the 1962 say. Was it actual 5 players, 5 black players on the team?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Bobby Mitchell, standout player. As I said, when I saw the documentary film Third and Long, and I didn't see the whole thing, but the portion that I saw when they were talking to Bobby Mitchell, some of the other black players who were the first to kind of come through and play, they said that they suffered a lot of racist abuse even at Redskins home games, and that just one incident that I was stunned, and I was preparing for a radio broadcast. I wasn't even really supposed to be paying attention to all of this, but it was on, and he said he would run into the end zone, and they have video of this too. That's why I said folks should make an effort to see this film. He's running into the end zone to score a touchdown for the Redskins, Pro Bowl season. And he said he would run into the end zone and immediately turn around and run out. He wouldn't celebrate, no spiking the ball, none of that. He would immediately turn around and run out because the fans would be yelling, throwing stuff at him, calling him nigger, all this other stuff. So it would just be run in, get the touchdown, and immediately run to the bench for safety. Did you hear, did you get to talk to Bobby Mitchell in writing this book?
I corresponded with him. I never talked to him on the telephone or face-to-face. I corresponded by letter with him, and he brought up some of those very points and said also that when he went to a restaurant, someone didn't spit in his face, but I think he said he spit on his shoe, and the person who was with Mitchell had to restrain him from an act of violence against the person who spit on him. So, there's plenty of that from Mitchell, and I think Mitchell was really he strikes me as being much more sensitive, let's say, than Jim Brown. Mitchell, in many ways, he suffered so much from this racism that he didn't want his son to go through it as a football player, either in college or in the pros. And he was really wounded by it. And I think he was also wounded by the fact that he couldn't become either a head coach or a general manager, which was his dream. And so I don't know whether bitter is the right word, but certainly he was disappointed and disheartened by the whole experience, even though he was a superstar athlete and a Hall of Famer.
Just to put this in perspective, I want to share some of the details that you relate about the torment, racist torment that they endured during this first season. But the Redskins franchise, prior to this, sticking to their racist policy of not having any black people on the team, the Redskins franchise was really, really bad for at least 10 years or so prior to, historically bad. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is. Yes. That's not overstated at all. That's accurate, yes.
Okay. And just to emphasize that for folks listening in, again, dedication to racism above even I thought football, the whole goal is to win the game. That's what it's all about. Who's going to get the title at the end, who's going to get the championship. Even if there are great players out there passing on Jim Brown, that should not be overlooked or minimized. The Redskins had an opportunity to draft him, declined. Many other talented black players, we don't want them. We'd rather have a terrible team as long as they're all white. So they bring in Bobby Mitchell, some of these other talented black players. This is on page 181. You write, as an Arkansas native, Bobby Mitchell considered Washington, D.C. to be the North, quote unquote. But shortly after returning from training camp in California, he learned that Washington was not free from Jim Crow. I began to go places, and people kind of got uptight, he remembered. All of a sudden, I thought, holy hell, because I hadn't experienced that. There were restaurants that were off limits. On one occasion, he and assistant coach Ted Marshall left Redskins headquarters to a place across the street where the coaches used to eat all the time. He invited me in. We walked up to the door, and all of a sudden, the guy doesn't know him. I was so embarrassed for Ted because I caught on pretty quick. So I said, there's another place where I've been waiting to eat. I didn't even know the name of the damn place. I just pointed to the first joint I saw. Mitchell, as Ken Dinglinger relates in the Washington Post publication Redskins, A History of Washington's Team, also remembered being spit on while dining at Duke Zeibert's restaurant. Despite a hostile racial climate, Mitchell faced enormous pressure to perform at a high level. It was a real traumatic thing to come from a winning football team, great surroundings, where your coach and management looked after you, to come here where you were being called nigger every day, and every time you run down the field, some guy's throwing something at you. It was a really terrible situation. And we're talking about the 60s. To have all that on your shoulders and try to perform, he continued, you had both white and black who couldn't stand for you to make a mistake. I didn't have the luxury of dropping the ball. I didn't have the luxury of not gaining yardage and having a bad day. It just wasn't allowed. Mitchell minimized his role as a racial pioneer. I'd been through being a first before, he stated, at Illinois. I was selected to integrate a dorm, and with a white student, not an athlete. He also downplayed comparisons with Jackie Robinson. He believed that his Hall of Fame career would have been even more stellar had he been able to handle the racial pressure as well as Robinson. I wasn't quite as tough as Jackie, he told the magazine Black Sports. The racial slurs affected me greatly, and I haven't forgotten them. When he says, and this might be incorrect, but it's in your book, so I'm asking, when he says he didn't feel he was quite as tough as Jackie Robinson, what do you think he meant by that?
I think he meant tough mentally. I think he just, there was certainly on-the-field pressure, but there was also pressure, being spit on and called nigger and all that kind of pressure. I think he just means that maybe he wasn't as tough mentally as Jackie Robinson. Of course, Jackie Robinson, I don't think there are very many people who were as tough mentally as Jackie Robinson, because not only did he have to go through the racism in Major League Baseball, but also in the military. So I think that's what he meant.
And what was just within the Redskins organization, like how were these black players, Bobby Mitchell, and how were they treated by their white teammates on the Redskins at that time?
I think it was mixed. Mitchell gives pretty high marks to the quarterback, Norm Snead, who was white. Snead, he said, was accepting of him, welcoming of him. Other players were not, but he did not want to name names. So he gives high marks to Norm Snead. He gives low marks to other players who were not welcoming, at least the first year or year and a half or 2 years. So, and it's got to be tough. I mean, there was no black players there who were established when he arrived to kind of help him along. And so he was a pioneer, even though he downplays his pioneer role. He was definitely a pioneer, and in the nation's capital as well. I mean, this is the nation's capital we're talking about, the so-called seat of American democracy and racial opportunity and equal opportunity, and here he's in a racial hornet's nest.
Wow. When these players arrive, the Redskins, they do much better the following season. I think they won. I think their first out of the first 6 games. I think they went 4-0, and they had 2 ties. They had 4 wins, no losses, 2 ties. So that's way better than they've done in forever, almost, at least since they've been relocated to D.C. Did it have a positive impact in terms of the bottom line? Were people upset about them having black players on the team, or in terms of the fan support of the team, was it positively, negatively impacted by these black players joining the club?
Oh, I think it was positive. I think that they saw the black players could contribute to perhaps a winning season and maybe a championship someday, because they had years and years of suffering losses. And, fans, they are about winning, and winning helps chemistry, and I'm sure it helped make Bobby Mitchell more accepted with the fans, just by having a star to root for, because they virtually had no stars, players, black or white, until Mitchell arrived, and he became a superstar. So, yeah, I think it really eased the way for fan acceptance. Had Mitchell been a mediocre or a lousy player, I just can't imagine how horrible his life would have been. I mean, it was horrible enough, but it would have been worse had he not been so successful of an athlete. So, yeah, I think it helped. Helped him be well received eventually.
You also include some of the other black athletes who were amongst the first to play for the Redskins. John Nisby, you read this is on 184. John Nisby was less charitable towards Marshall. I never appreciated the man at all because of the stand he took on blacks prior to my arrival here. My relationship with the front office wasn't really that great. He also had difficulty accepting Bill McPeak as head coach because he had outperformed him and had taken his job at guard with the Steelers. His dismissive attitude toward McPeak and his demand for a salary increase after the 1963 season brought his release and an end to his football career. Just, again, I would encourage folks with all of this to kind of keep in context things that are happening at this time. You've got the March on Washington happening in D.C. In 63 during this time period. As we already talked about the Freedom Rides going down in 1961, 1962. You talk about in the book, mentioned Ole Miss earlier, James Meredith and, quote-unquote, his efforts to integrate at Ole Miss, really a historic chunk of time. With just all sorts of things happening with regards to racism almost on a daily basis, with what the crisis that happened in Birmingham that was also in 63 with Bull Connor sticking the dogs on children out in the middle of the street, and that became really international news, front page certainly in this area of the world. Just historic chunk of time where all of this is happening with the Redskins franchise. That and some of these players, Bobby Mitchell ended up becoming a Hall of Famer. You talk in the book some of the Redskins black players who ended up playing for the Redskins down the road. Doug Williams, first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl with the Redskins team in the 80s. Art Monk, Hall of Fame wide receiver for the Redskins, also with the team in the 80s. You talk about their understanding of how things had changed, and even people saying, hey, we've got to root for the Redskins now. It went from almost a 180-degree turn from having a lot of black people who said that they would not watch the Redskins, wouldn't support the Redskins because of the long legacy of what Marshall did and them not having any black players, and even the treatment of Bobby Mitchell and other black players, to them winning that Super Bowl with Doug Williams, black quarterback, saying, oh, we love the Redskins. That's got to watch them, got to root for them forever. Mm-hmm.
Where'd you go?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think it was Mitchell that kind of set that whole thing in motion, and of course Williams winning the Super Bowl put the lie to the fact that blacks couldn't be quarterbacks because they were inferior thinkers. That was obviously he put that stereotype down, and so I think Mitchell and Williams really did wonders for the Redskins.
I would encourage folks. We have about 20 minutes left in the program. If you have any questions you would like to ask Dr. Thomas G. Smith, the number to dial 760-569-7676, and the code is 564943 pound. The number one more time, 760-569-7676, and the code is 564943 pound. Press star 6 if you have questions. With regards to the logo, as I said, when I grew up in the D.C. area, was born in Virginia, grew up, they broadcast a lot of Redskins games while I was there. I imagine they still do. I began to understand that there was a problem with the logo for the Washington Redskins, really the name of the franchise and the whole nine. We actually had one of our previous guests on the program. She talked about how this is a staple aspect of racism, white supremacy, and in fact, the term she used, she said that she felt like there's a legacy of worshiping previous acts of racism against non-white people, and she said that it's not, the Redskins are not the only franchise in this regard. If you're talking about the Washington Redskins, the Texas Rangers, the Cleveland Indians, lots of this throughout the sports world and other areas of people activity, but she said that this legacy of taking different groups of non-white people and assigning them some trivial mascot role or some symbolism of a non-white group of people to represent entertainment for white people. She talks about the significance of that, the importance of that, and I would say especially with the Redskins franchise being valued as one of the top 4 sports franchises in the world, unless I'm incorrect, with the Dallas Cowboys, New York Yankees, Manchester United. As Dave Zyron, he said in the sound clip, he says it tends to rotate from year to year between the Cowboys, Indians, and just the symbolism of what that means even on into the 21st century. The team and the logo, I still, even in the past, I think 14 days, have still seen reports where people are saying they need to change the logo. It's time, it's 2013, black president, let's change the logo, let's change the whole name of the team. The Redskins, to my knowledge, have been very resistant for their entire history to making any changes. I still haven't seen any evidence where they're going to make any changes. Do you think that's something that's going to happen? Have you seen any indications that that might happen sometime in the near future?
I think if it happens, it's going to happen through the courts. I think if there's a lawsuit pending now, I forget what it's called, but I think that could go against the Redskins, and I don't think the Redskins are willingly going to change that logo because it's been around forever, and it symbolizes, it may symbolize racism, but it also symbolizes tradition and their past. You know, it's much like the damn Confederate flag is a symbol to segregationists and racists. To me, it's not much different than flying the Confederate flag, having that symbol on their helmets. So I don't think the Redskins are going to change. I think it's going to have to come through public pressure and the courts, much like school integration came through the courts. But I think if I think one non-mainstream paper in Washington, D.C. is not referring to them as the Redskins anymore. I think they're referring to them as the Pigskins. But if the Washington Post ever changes its policy and starts calling them something other than the Redskins, this might help change the logo. But I don't think the Redskins are going to willingly do it. I think they're going to have to be forced to do it, just like George Marshall was forced to do it. And I don't know whether that force is going to come from the courts or public pressure or the African-American community, but it's going to have to come through pressure because I don't think they're willingly going to do it themselves. And I don't know what a new nickname would be, but I'm sure the Washington community and the Redskins fan base could come up with a very attractive nickname that would replace the Redskins and that offensive logo.
I would my view, I would substitute offensive for racist. I think it's accurate to call things what they are, particularly given the history. I thought it was racist prior to knowing. I didn't even know who George Preston Marshall was until I read Dave Zyron's book, and then I got a lot more information reading your book. But knowing all of that, in addition just to what I can see with my naked eye when I see their uniform, yes, I would just say that right there is racism, white supremacy, and it should be changed. I mean, it's an embarrassment in 2013. That's what we had, and I'm proud to have that, obviously, with that being such a valuable franchise and has been for so long. Do you think it would be correct? The correct thing to do would be to change the logo?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm in favor of changing the logo and just getting rid of the whole, not the tradition of the Redskins, but the tradition of using an ethnic group as a mascot. I just think it's demeaning. I mean, what could be more demeaning than to portray human beings as a mascot? I mean, it's not cute. It's demeaning. I mean, an animal's fine, but not not a group of people.
I was even if we're just talking about the D.C. area, they do have a history, as one of our callers pointed out before, of changing professional sports names of a team that they found to be offensive or somehow contributing to something that's incorrect. The Washington Wizards, not that long ago, they were the Washington Bullets. They had been the Washington Bullets for quite a number of years, and they changed it. It seemed it didn't even take that long. I don't think there was a long legacy of uproar and complaints about the name. Someone just said that they have a lot of crime, death by murders, and gun violence in the D.C. area, and that maybe they shouldn't have a sports franchise associated with bullets. And it seemed to change within a blink of an eye. It went from that to the Wizards, and it gives an opportunity you can sell and make a lot more money. All your fans now, they got to buy new gear if they're going to support and get new paraphernalia. It gives you an opportunity to make a lot of money. I definitely think they could do so. Just in my view, the system of white supremacy being an ongoing enterprise, I don't see that white people have any interest in divesting from the practice of racism and white supremacy. As you said, I don't see any voluntary effort to change the logo. And in fact, I would point people to the Atlanta Braves. There was just a pretty big controversy around their logo. I think they came out with a new proposal for a logo that was going to have a huge image of a screaming Native American on the front of it. This is 2013 that this was going down, and people complained about it and called it out as obvious, trifling racism, and then they nixed it and decided that they weren't going to do it. But just the fact that such a thing would come up in 2013 to me says a lot about where we are and how far we have to go with regards to replacing white supremacy with justice. We did have, I did see a person that dialed in. They had a question. The person that dialed in 8753. Did you have a question for Dr. Smith?
Yes, greetings. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Dr. Smith. Greetings to everyone on the line and to you, Dr. Smith. Can you tell me the name of the county that the stadium sits in, Washington Redskins?
The current stadium?
Yes, sir.
The stadium that was integrated was near Anacostia Flats, Washington, D.C. The new stadium, there's a new stadium that's been built in the last 15 or 20 years, and I forget whether that's in a suburb, but I forget whether it's in Washington in Maryland or in Virginia. That would be the brand new stadium of the Redskins. So they don't play in the stadium that the Kennedy administration forced them to integrate. It's still there.
Which county was that? Was that just D.C.?
Yes, that was D.C.
Okay.
The Anacostia Flats region of D.C.
Okay. And one more question. I'm sorry?
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. One more question, sir. Can you speak to or talk about the hiring practices of the NFL today, as far as GM, coaches, training staff, team doctors? Are you able to speak on that?
I don't have statistics at the tip of my tongue, but I can speak in general terms that certainly there is a long way to go. I think there is something called the Rooney Rule that forces NFL teams to interview black candidates for opening at the head coaching level and the GM level, but I think those are just more or less token interviews. They are not taken very seriously. I think there is a long way to go, and there's a long way to go for black ownership of a team. I don't see that happening in the immediate future. I think there's a shortage of GMs, and I think there's a shortage of head coaches. And part of the reason is that they're not training enough assistant coaches to move into the head coaching ranks or the GM ranks. I mean, the NFL's got a long way to go despite the so-called Rooney Rule.
Okay. All right. One more thing. You all were just speaking of the Atlanta Braves. I'm calling from Cleveland, Ohio. And here our team, is the Cleveland Indians, the name of our team. Yep. And it sits in the county of Cuyahoga, which was Indian tribe at one point in time. That's all I have for this evening, and I thank you for taking my question and my statement. Thank you, Gus.
Thank you for the call. Pattern of that sort of thing, as I said, I guessed her name, Jacqueline Batalore. She's a professor in Illinois, and she talked about that. It's not just the Redskins. Long history of that. Texas Rangers is another one. I think most people would not recognize the Texas Rangers as being pretty much the same thing as the Washington Redskins because they don't know the history of the Texas Rangers, but she broke that down in elaborate, easy-to-understand detail when she was a guest on the program in May of 2010, pattern of racist, white supremacist behavior. And I actually found the website while we were looking. Now that I know the name, they have a whole website set up for that film. It's Third and Long, the history of African Americans in pro football from 1946 to 1989. They have lots of information. You can go check it out. It was the half that I saw was fantastic. Just visit the website thirdandlong.tv. One of our listeners, they emailed a question. Their question is, who is responsible for the fact that the head referee who wears the white hat is the most powerful referee, and can you speak to the symbolism of the most powerful official on the field wearing a white hat while all of the other officials wear dark black hats?
that had never crossed my mind before. I had never even considered it. So, no, I can't speak to it intelligently because I never even noticed it before, and that would be an interesting historical and sociological essay to pursue. That's very interesting. I wish I could be helpful. It's a great question.
They have images. I hadn't noticed that either. I don't watch a lot of football games anymore, but I hadn't noticed that either until I was watching the tail end of the Seahawks game with the Packers this past year when they had there was a labor dispute and they had the replacement officials and everyone griped and complained about the horrible call and the way that game ended. But when I was noticing the photographs when the referees got together to make the decision on the game, it came to my attention because they had all the officials together and all of them had on black hats except for one. And it was the head official who had a white hat on. All of the other officials had black hats on. The official.
That's very perceptive. I've never noticed that before. At one time, all the flags were white too. When they throw the flag, it used to be white. Now I guess it's yellow. I don't know why the change, but maybe there's a racist angle to it. I don't know. Maybe there's a racist reason, but I never even noticed it before.
The details.
I know. And the caller helped me pronounce Cuyahoga County. I've never known how to pronounce that. I'm glad he said it.
Appreciate the caller. I've never been to Cleveland, so right on. Also wanted to get, because we started off with this, and this is what reminded me I had failed in my efforts to track down your contact information and the name of the film that you were in until the playoff game between Seattle and Washington just this past January, and the whole incident with Robert Griffin III. For folks who don't know, Robert Griffin III, this was his rookie season, phenomenal athlete, just again, resurrected the Redskins franchise. They had been really terrible, and he came in and played really well, starting quarterback. He got hurt towards the end of the season. He came back. He was playing, but there were still concerns that he hadn't healed completely, that he still had some serious leg issues, and the doctor that cleared him had concerns that I've cleared him, but I'm nervous about this. I don't know if he should be on the field. We might have cleared him too soon. He could get re-injured, and this could cause major damage, long-term career damage. And during the course of the game with Seattle, just this past January, he did get hurt in this playoff game, and the audio clip that we began the program with, I had to stop watching the game. His knee turned in a really just heinous manner to see the knee is just not supposed to turn that way. He collapsed on the field in obvious pain, had to be carted off, and now they have serious questions about his career and how long it's going to take him to come back. And just that audio segment, I pressed record just because of what I knew about the Redskins franchise, just the symbolism of this black male being on the field crumpled in a heap with his knee, and to hear Troy Aikman say that the Redskins franchise just put this whole team on this black male's back and rode him throughout the season and tried to do it again, and his knee just couldn't take it, and he's just collapsed in a heap on the field. Did you have any thoughts about that with what happened with RG3 at the end of the season?
My only thought when it happened is, why would they risk this franchise-saving athlete? Why would they risk his future when, the Washington Nationals baseball team, they've got a white pitcher, Steven Strasburg, and they limit his innings because they don't want to injure his arm and hurt the poor guy, so they limit his innings and prevent him from pitching like the last month of the season, and yet the Redskins in the same town let RG3 play when they knew he was injured, and it might risk even greater injury, and it might risk the whole franchise. I just couldn't understand it. I thought it was so dumb. And what I also can't understand is why the coach isn't coming under more fire for doing it. I mean, it was so dumb. Sorry, I got a little excited there.
Nope, no worries. It was gruesome. I could not endure watching it. I was reminded, and this is one of those, in my view, this is also a pattern with regards to the practice of racism. There was an article, and I read the article. I would have read it today, but I read it before. I don't like being repetitive. But there was an article that came out towards the end of May of 2012, my apologies, where some white scientists, they did a study, and they found that with athletes, there is an expectation. If it's a black athlete and he gets hurt, there's an expectation that he will come back and play sooner than a white athlete. And they said they made sure to offer a caveat to say that doesn't necessarily mean that the black athlete will play before the white athlete does, but there is an expectation, and they said that this expectation is there amongst white people and non-white people, where there seems to be some sort of desensitization with regards to black athletes and their ability to endure pain, which that also is a common racist theme that comes up quite a bit. It's in Dr. John Hoberman's book, Darwin's Athletes, which I referenced earlier, where, hey, they can endure it, they're not going to get hurt, there's some sort of superhuman, even reminding me of what Jimmy the Greek said. They've been genetically modified from slave plantation days to be phenomenal athletes and go out and stomp over everybody on the field. That is exactly what came to mind when I saw what happened with RG3, that we really don't have that much of a value for black people. And in fact, in my view, it even would be connected with the very logo of the Redskins franchise. This is the sort of thing I would expect to happen when you make a habit, make it a practice of dehumanizing people. There's a lack of empathy. There's a lack of concern, a lack of value for these individuals, and I think that's exactly what happened with Robert Griffin Jr., and it ties in exactly, in my view, with what we've been talking about the whole program, where you said, why would you do this? Why would you put your franchise quarterback at risk for the future? This is his rookie season. He's, hoping he can play for another 10, 15 years. Why would you do that? Valuing racism, white supremacy, even above the success, the wins of your franchise. I'm not saying that that's explicitly what happened, but as you said, they certainly don't do that with white pitchers for the Washington Nationals. I have a very hard time thinking they would have done this sort of thing to Tom Brady, Brett Favre in his heyday, Aaron Rodgers with the Green Bay Packers. I have a hard time thinking they would have done that with a white quarterback, putting him out there. And it's not like with Robert Griffin Jr. He had been hurt and playing for a long time during that game before he actually got hurt and couldn't do anymore. Why in the world didn't they go ahead and just yank him off the field to save him and to give the team a shot at winning? Does that make sense, what I'm saying, or am I talking off base?
No, I completely agree. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's a very apt description, and it's just mind-blowing that someone would have done that.
Pitiful. I will assume folks are good. You all don't have any questions. I'll give 30 seconds if you have a quick question you want to get in before we let Dr. Smith go. The book, again, Showdown, JFK, and the Integration of the Washington Redskins. It gives a lot of great information. I would again emphasize the black press and the role that they played. It was really, for me, it was phenomenal. I wasn't aware of Mr. Lacey and his work and a lot of the other folks that participated and just wrote outstanding columns and talking about the history of racism. We did have one other caller. Did you have a quick question for Dr. Smith before he exits? Caller in the Bronx, did you have a question?
Sure. Thanks for taking my call, Gus. Hello to the callers and the guest as well. I was just wanted to ask, from your studies, like, what do you think was the intention of the, like you talked about segregationists, and I guess the other side of that would be the people that were supportive of what they call integration. And so what was their stance? Like, what was their specific, like, end goal, like, looking down the line, like, what they want to accomplish?
I think the segregationists wanted to accomplish the point.
Oh, no, the other people. I mean, the people who wanted to have black people represented, you know.
I guess I'm missing your question.
I guess what the white people that wanted, you know, to have black people be
what
on
was
the same.
Point of the white people that wanted to integrate the team?
Right. Yeah. What was their intention?
Yeah. I think their intention was some of them to help the team win, for one thing, and the other thing is social justice. I mean, there were some good-intentioned people out there, and I think Udall was one of them. I think he was far more well-intentioned than John Kennedy was. So I think there's a matter of social justice, racial justice, whatever you want to call it, and I think there's also the matter of, hey, you know, we need black players to win, and this franchise stinks, so let's get some black players, and maybe we can win and do right at the same time.
Interesting. It almost sounds like they just wanted manpower. Is that basically it? I mean, besides,
I think they wanted athletic manpower. Yeah, it wasn't just any manpower, but yeah, they thought that manpower would help the franchise. Yes, I think that's basically it.
Well, thanks for answering my call. It's interesting.
Appreciate hearing from you, caller in the Bronx. Again, the book Showdown, JFK, and the Integration of the Washington Redskins. You were saying you thought if the logo is going to be changed, it's going to have to be through the courts, similar to what happened with them getting black players for the Redskins in the first place. Do you imagine that you would have a backlash of white fans? Not all, but...
Oh, yes, I'm sure. But I think that they would eventually accept it, just like the white fans accepted Jackie Robinson, and just like they finally accepted Bobby Mitchell. They're all for the team and winning, so I think that eventually there'll be some satisfaction, and they'll go along with it. You know, you said the fans went along with the Wizards going, or the Bullets going, changing their name, so I think the Redskins will eventually, the Redskins fans will accept it.
The Washington Bullets certainly don't have the history. They're not one of the top 4 most profitable franchises in the world. I think boy, I would, if you're in the D.C. area, if that ever happens, I would say get your camcorder out. You are going to see some racist antics like you have not seen in a while. If that ever happens, if a change is...
I think there will be some cars overturned and some that kind of thing, but eventually it'll settle down.
Right on. Before you exit, one listener, he wrote in one of the quotes from Mr. Lacey that he found. This was, I guess, a story about Sam Lacey talking about his dad. And he said, fans like my father would line up for hours to watch their heroes pass by. And so there he was, age 79, out there cheering with the rest of them, calling all the players by name, just happy to be there. And then it happened. One of the white players, I won't say which one, just gave him a nasty look, and as he passed by, spat right in his face, right in that nice old man's face. That hurt my father terribly. And you know, as big a fan as he had been, he never went to another game as long as he lived, which was 7 more years. Oh, we've come a long way since then, but we still got a long way to go. Sam Lacey talking about his father. And I hadn't even heard about him until I read your book. Thank you a ton for being on the program. I learned a lot about the Redskins franchise and racism in sports. Really appreciate your work, Dr. Smith.
Okay, Gus, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it and enjoyed the calls. Keep up the good work.
Will do so. Thank you a bunch, sir. Have a great evening, and we will speak to you soon, sir.
Okay, bye.
Take care. Context of White Supremacy. We'll take a quick commercial break and then see if any of the folks that dialed in, if they have anything they would like to add. I'll flip through because he has some pretty juicy anecdotes in here of just white people doing what they do. I'll flip through in the break and see if I can find any others. I'll also get the name of the study where they were talking about how white people, I got that from Scotty Reed, founder of the Black Talk Radio Network, where they detailed that, yes, there's an expectation that if you are a black athlete and should you get hurt, there's an expectation that you will be back out there, get back out in the field and do your thing much sooner than a white athlete. I actually contacted one of the white people who did that study to see if she'd be willing to come on the program, and she was doing she didn't say no. She said she would be down, but she, of course, was hemming and hawing and saying she didn't think it was racism and it was more complicated than just being racism that led to Robert Griffin III being injured. Anywho, we'll do all that after the commercial break. Quick break, and I'll get that sound clip in as well. Context of White Supremacy. We will be right back. This is not me for some reason. The sound clip is not going. We'll give it another second and see if it rolls in. Again, check the program page for the updates to see when we'll have our next program. You can check the Facebook page. My Facebook is facebook.com/the problem is white people. Facebook.com/the problem is white people. That is not the Cows Group. That's my page. I generally post. We're going to have programs. I put it on both pages, but you'll be in the know either way. And Twitter, I use that as well to update for shows. If you're interested in getting updates when the next broadcast is going to be, you can use my Twitter account as well. My Twitter is at Until Justice. Again, it is at Until Justice. See if I can fix the clip here. I have never had that before where the files are just not loading, and I'd already played one sound clip for the broadcast. I'm a little miffed as to why it's not playing now. I'm going to give it one more shot. If it doesn't work this time, we'll do that a little later in the program and see if folks have anything they would like to share. I was going to take the down second to see if I could find some more of the juicy parts from the book to share. Always like getting examples of when white people were more open and explicit in the practice of racism, white supremacy, when there wasn't so much refinement, less confusion about what's going down on the plantation. Let's see here, give it one more try. Let's see if that will free things up. Okay. I would apologize, but I'm not really sure. I know I didn't do anything crazy. Like I said, I'd already played a sound clip earlier in the program, so I'm a little confused as to why it is being difficult now. All right. It's not working right now. Perhaps we'll play it right now. Not doing it. Well, it has not worked. We will have to do it a little later. The folks that dialed in, if y'all had anything you wanted to share, I see other folks dialed in as well. If there's any folks on the line who have commentary they would like to add, feel free, put your hand up. The caller in the Bronx should be with us, and I guess the caller in Cleveland. I don't know if you're in Cleveland or you just know the information. I think you said you're in Cleveland, so our caller in Cleveland, caller in the Bronx, you both should be with us. Oh, okay, perhaps they're all good. The caller in the Bronx, caller in Cleveland, are you all good? Did y'all have anything you wanted to share?
Hey, Gus. Have you heard?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm not really very knowledgeable about sports, so I don't know. Kind of, I guess some of it goes over my head, but interesting information. It just seems like just such a sweeping dynamic, like with the whole thing about he's talking about segregation and everything, and just how it gets played out with black people being used as pawns and not really understanding fully what's going on. But I don't know.
Yeah, I certainly am not encouraging anybody to take up sports, watching the Redskins, to root for or against them. Certainly not encouraging that. Just like anything, it can reveal racism, white supremacy. I would say it's a great example. I love getting information from my folder when people try to say that there is something valued more than racism, white supremacy, whether it's money or whatever the case may be. I love getting evidence that shows that that is not true, that the penultimate value is the domination, terrorism against non-white people. When he talks in the book, winning whatever, doesn't matter. We don't care if we're losing games. And in the book, he repeatedly says the Redskins' refusal to have black players on their team contributed to them being horrible. It contributed. It was a big part of their franchise, not winning games and being pitiful for years and years and years up until they were forced to do so. Great illustration. Doesn't matter, even if the team is losing, that's okay, and the fans still support it. That's in there as well. The fans didn't abandon them. The fans didn't put bags on their head and go to games and call the players names and stop buying tickets. That didn't happen at all. They continued to support the team, love the Redskins. As I grew up in the Virginia area, rabid Redskins fans. Doesn't matter if they're losing games. We're going to support this team. And I think that goes exactly to what that logo is all about, the history of John Preston Marshall. It's exactly what that's all about. And I'm sure that, I won't say all, but I suspect a good chunk of their fan base, they know the history of the Redskins franchise and what they were all about. Them playing Dixie halftime and having the minstrel halftime performances and all that. I'm sure they know about that legacy.
Greetings. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a little bit of a sports enthusiast. Only now I've changed it to paying more attention to what exactly is going on. Former college athlete, scholarship, took more pride in the sport itself than the education. And now I understand my mistakes. But when you said you didn't understand why people pay to come see, it's football is it's almost like it's a gladiator. It's I found out and I figured in my mind that I was a gladiator, and the stadium is nothing more than a coliseum. It's controlled violence. Violence is cheered, and the more violent collision is, the more kudos and pats that you get. So that's pretty much it. It's just a revamp of the Roman Coliseum with football. And let me see, what else do I have? Doug Williams, like you said, was supposed to erase. I was supposed to erase the historic racism of George Marshall in black people's minds. And with RG3 is part 2. And that's a little tough to talk about. Nothing speaking bad about victims, but like I said, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and the only way out of this city, sometimes most people think, is through sports, through a scholarship, basketball, football, whatever, track. You're pushed more in these things than you are within the education. Cleveland school system, anyone can look it up and check it out. New superintendent every year, every 2 years. It's a state of confusion. I'm in the process of trying to figure out where and how this can stop. Recently, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with Cleveland, but a councilman, he's been arrested for DUIs almost like 3 times. And they keep re-electing him. And I looked at it and I said, this is nothing more than Operation Marion Barry. The same way that Marion Barry was held up. We're all human. But nothing goes on in these wards. Nothing is done. And I think that's all I have for now. Yeah, but yeah, the Coliseum, like I said, football, that was my thing, and I coach Little League, and the parents come, and they want to know how it's sad, how an 8-year-old can get a scholarship. and you have these private schools who pick the most talented kids to come to their schools. So you'll see 2 or 3 black players on these teams, and they've been taken away from the city leagues, the muni leagues, they call them. So that's the thing with football. That's what's going on with football. It's the Roman Coliseum all over again. Just we got pads on now. Thank you for listening.
I appreciate you sharing about your experience. That I was curious if people had any thoughts on that part of the program when we were talking about the black fans continuing to go to support the Redskins, even with all of their history of racism. And I think you're exactly on the money with regards to it's just a refined 21st century version of the Roman Coliseum. They even call some of these stadiums the Coliseum. I think the one in Oakland that's called the Coliseum. They make it real plain in some of them. So I completely agree. But even with that, right, like saying, okay, it's the Coliseum, and white people have a long history of going to celebrate violence. Maybe we'll get to see somebody get killed on the field. You said more violent the hit, the better it is. I know they had a whole segment, I'm sure they still do, for the NFL called Jacked Up, where they get excited to show the people that they got the hardest hits. Maybe somebody got a concussion. Maybe they got knocked out on the field. Excuse me. Where they make that something we want to make sure we can see that. Let's zoom in and let's get it in HD and slow motion. Oh, did you see his teeth go flying out of his head? And enjoying and cheering for that sort of thing. Even with all that, like let's say I'm a black person, even if I enjoy that, which I think 909, he was talking about how in terms of what the nature of racist is and what our nature should be, like, I totally agree. There should be some separation. There should be some, wait a minute, if this is stuff that white people are into and make a big deal about and support, maybe I should think twice about whether I want to be participating in that. That celebration of violence, I think all of that goes with racist culture. If you know you're going to be stomping on people, you know you're going to be killing people by the thousands, by the millions, which is guaranteed under racism and white supremacy, you got to enforce that 24/7. And I think their Roman antics with football and these other sports, MMA and all the violent sports and violent films, violent entertainment, period, I think that enforces all of that. And I think we should have some questions about whether or not, this is something that's taken us where we need to go with regards to universal man, universal woman. And even if I'm not on all of that, I'm not fitting to give one nickel, one pecan, as my friend in Atlanta would say. They would not get a pecan from me, any of them, but especially if you're just making it plain, we don't like niggers. Fine, have your team. I'm not protesting. I'm not picketing. I'm not going to beg you to have black players. I'm just going to make sure I don't invest one iota of my time, energy, currency in your franchise, and will encourage other black people to do the same. Even modern day with the Cleveland Cavaliers, the way they behaved about LeBron James burning his jersey in Cleveland and all that. Cool in the game. I'm not going to protest. I'm not going to go out and picket. I'm not going to write any letters. I just want to take pictures and remember your conduct. Make sure I encourage other black people. Make sure you don't support Cleveland. I don't care if they get the next Michael Jordan. I don't care if they go crazy and win 70 games this year. Kyrie Irving is great. Maybe they'll get him a great teammate. Remember their conduct.
Gus, I'm sorry. I understand totally what you're saying, but I'm right here in the middle of it, and it doesn't matter. Like, for example, the black quarterback thing. When a team came back to Cleveland and they had a chance to draft Donovan McNabb and a couple other black quarterbacks in the draft, and they chose Tim Couch instead. I mean, it was plain. Cleveland has never had but one or two backup black quarterbacks in the franchise's history, and people know this. I have many friends who go to tailgates They tell me it's a good time. I asked them about it, and what it sounds like is, oh, they just said that, or they just did that because they were drunk, or they were ignorant. And I'm trying my best to explain to them that it's a business, and it's going to continue. But the Cavaliers, I mean, even with the Cavaliers, the same thing. They still come to the stadium to see the Cavs. Even with Kyrie Irving hurt, they give away tickets. It's half empty now. I mean, but you know, he's still making money. He's still making money, and they know all these things. They have a new casino now in Cleveland, right next door to the arena, the basketball arena, and it's a lot of confusion, Gus, and I'm buckling down. I've been doing some field research, going out there, going out to the clubs, going to these games, and seeing what's going on. And to me, it's a groupthink pattern of what is okay and what is cool. So I don't know what it's going to take. Everyone, Pam, I remember her saying it's going to take a revolution of the mind. But what's the carrot? What's the carrot at the end? Because they get pats on the head for doing these things. They get lots of money for clowning the way that they do, for playing basketball, for playing football. How am I going to tell a kid not to play football and get a scholarship? The only thing I'm doing now is explaining to them what to look for, what to watch out for, what should be done. What about your community? Community service. We come clean up our community. I coach in the suburbs, but I bring them to the city to clean up my neighborhood and the neighborhoods around me for community service. Just to show them it's not easy for everybody. Everybody doesn't understand. So I don't know, Gus, but the sports thing, it's an escape. It's an escape, period. Point blank, period. You don't have to think about anything other than rooting or booing. They're not looking at racism. They're looking at how they're being treated when they ask for their tickets constantly, and they see white people walking to their seats with no problem, but you're going to get stopped and asked for your ticket, to look at your ticket. They don't look at that as racism. It's just what it is, the way it is. So I don't know. I don't know, Gus. I need suggestions from anyone will be great, because I'm tired of watching it, and it's about time. It's been time.
I mean, it isn't sustainable, though. I mean, it no matter what, it can't go on forever like that, because it's like, I mean, it's just all set up to be this just consumption, beat everybody up, win, like he said, you know, they just wanted to win. He said something about social justice. I don't know what that means, but he was saying that, you know, basically they just wanted to win, and that it's just like you can't win forever. And I mean, it just seems to me the whole thing, like, I mean, you walk around, you see people with, like, you know, sports regalia, all these sports, you know, hats and fitted hats and the, you know, jackets and whatnot. I mean, it's just like, it's a kind of a, I don't know, it's like a status symbol, you know, having those hats on and those, you know, clothing. In a way, it's like a status symbol that, like, you're part of the middle class that can afford to buy stuff, you know. But it doesn't really mean anything beyond that. So, I don't know, I think that, you know, eventually it's going to have to be replaced with something better.
This isn't new, by the way, in terms of and what the caller in Cleveland, what he was talking about with regards to black people, the escapism. This just being another aspect of entertainment escapism, where you don't have to think about racism, and you get to fantasize that there is no racism, because you get to see, now anyway, you get to see a lot of black people who look like they're doing well. They are winning the championships and dominating and looking like they're the best in the business. So you would think, hey, there's certainly no racism, white supremacy here. I would say, number one, understanding that that's just another part of our conditioning, that's something. If I had got my sound clip, I would have had a few extra minutes to get some of the other passages, because he had a lot. It kept popping up in this book over and over and over. And we're talking 1930s, 1940s, like when black people are being lynched, like regularly, all over. And you still had black people who were going to see these games, paying money and going to see the Redskins and other sports teams, whether they had black people or not. And they were asking, like some black people were asking and saying, well, why are you going to do this? Why are you supporting this team? Why are you giving them your money? And some of the things that they said back then, we're talking 60, 70 years ago, sound very similar to the excuses or the reasoning that you get from victims today, which in my opinion just speaks to this is generational conditioning. The sound clip that I play on a regular bit, my conditioning has been conditioned with regards to how we think. And I think a lot of that is just, it's rooted in when you don't understand racism, white supremacy, it totally confuses your ability to make logical, rational, counter-racist choices. And I think for a lot of us, I think it's very similar to President Obama and the appeal that he has for a lot of black people. And seeing him and wanting to cheer and wanting to support him and wanting to go vote and feeling so great about him and not thinking within the context of white supremacy. It's absolutely the same. And I just think for a lot of black people, we invest waste a lot of time and energy in the sports and entertainment and not thinking from a broader perspective, well, if I am going to be interested in sports and entertainment, how about owning a team? How about managing a team? You can do that a lot longer than playing. Playing, you could get hurt and be out your first season, Robert Griffin Jr. You could be an owner from a wheelchair. You could be a coach from a wheelchair. I mean, you could be in a management position where you're making big time at just as much money as you would if you were a great player, and you could do that for a lot longer, and you're still in the building. You're still doing the sports thing and the whole nine. We do not think from that perspective. So that's some of the stuff that I would do with regards if I was talking to especially younger people, like getting them thinking in terms of, don't you want to be an owner? Don't you want to be like to have your own franchise? You can pick the jersey, you can pick the team, and you can do that for a lot longer than actually playing. It's only a small window, if at all. You even have the talent to be someone who could be out on the field. But in terms of managing, coaching, being the brains behind sports, you could do that for a lifetime and have a huge legacy on sports, who plays for your team, what the team looks like, and all that. You can have a lot more impact in terms of being in management position, thinking of that, and then the racism that's involved in that. I think that same caller that brought up the Rooney Rule, bringing that up, I think would be great. And then also one of our guests, Calvin Thomas, he has a documentary film. It just came out a couple months ago talking about the number of black athletes who ended up committing suicide. That was just huge news just in the past year, how many black athletes have committed suicide. That would be another thing that I would bring up. This keeps happening. Why do you think that is? What's behind this? Junior Seau even bringing that up. What's behind this? And see what they have to say, just to see what their thought process is on that. What's driving that? How could all these athletes, young black male athletes who seem to have so much, they got these big contracts, got all this money, got all this fame, they're on television, and then they're committing suicide. What do you think is behind that? And even Bruce Fine, I'll mute my line. Bruce Fine, she was even saying with Jackie Robinson, he died at 53. That is in my opinion, that is extremely young to die at 53 years old. And somebody who made a lot of money at that time and well-known, set all these records, and he died so early. What's behind that? Could that be racism, white supremacy? I'll mute my line.
I can speak to why some of the athletes have been committing suicide. When I stopped playing, I was suspended from school my senior year, going into my senior year, preseason third-team All-American from the Mid-American Conference, small conference. When I got home and came back to Cleveland, you don't hear the roar anymore. The roar of the crowd is so intoxicating. That's the best word I can use right now. It's so intoxicating that when it stops, you don't know what to do. You're not trained. You're not taught. No one talks to you about what to do when that roar stops. When those accolades and those pats, the pat on the head. I'm thinking of the house Negro, of the pat of the head. When you don't get that anymore, no one recognizes you walking down the street anymore. You don't know what to do with yourself. I came home. I didn't think about committing suicide, but I didn't want to live anymore. I don't know if that's the same thing, but I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't have any more autographs to sign. No one wanted my wristbands anymore. No one was asking for my jersey. No more free food from the local from the college spot that everybody goes to. No more walking to the front of the lines. It's so many different things that an athlete of most of the people who've committed suicide, the stature and the concussions. Like I was a hitter, and concussions. I played seeing three images, praying and hoping that the ball didn't come our way because I couldn't see. But you don't go to the sideline and tell the coach that you can't see. You don't want to come out of the game. That might be your spot. So you take these hits on the head over and over and over and over again, and some people it's too much. And that roar, what for? Why do I have these headaches anymore? I took the headaches before because I knew I was going to make a good play, and I was going to be rewarded for it. But now I have these headaches and this pain in my body and my neck and my shoulders, and no one is cheering for me anymore. So that's what I honestly believe most of these guys are committing suicide for, is that roar and those concussions together and the pain. It's not worth. They feel like it's not worth it anymore. That was the first time I shared that.
I appreciate you sharing, sir. I think that's a lot of what Calvin Thomas, he's supposed to be on the program. I've been trying for a while, when the whole Javon Belcher, when he killed the mother of his child and then committed suicide, I was trying to get him on the program then to go into more detail about that. But I think that's a lot of his documentary film revolves around that, and he worked with Anthony Pryor, who wrote Slave Side of Sunday. They worked together. I was trying to get them both on the program together to talk about that, but I think your experience, in fact, I'll sum it up so that I'm not talking a whole lot. Under the system of white supremacy, it sounds like getting all that attention, especially from a lot of white people. Hey,
yeah,
I'm not being treated like a nigger anymore.
You're not. You're not. You're not. And you don't really see it. I look back on my college teammates now, and it was okay for me to come to the party or to be in a certain place, but those other guys were black guys. Like, hey man, they cool. They with me. Oh, okay. But if they wasn't, hey, you guys have to get out of here. Now, if I wasn't around, I don't know what they would have said. So you're not. You don't. These high-paid athletes, they're not niggas. No way. I'm not treated like one. They ain't saying it to my face because I got all this money in my pocket. And I got access to anything I want. Anything I need. Alcohol. I battle alcohol. Alcohol was the dull to pain. Brett Favre talked about how he was hooked on painkillers and everything was okay. But Adam Pac-Man Jones' alcohol problem was looked at as a problem of his social behavior. And all it had to do was he's deep in alcohol. This is just my opinion. Because it seems like every time he gets in trouble or any other athlete gets in trouble, it is dealing with alcohol. And this alcohol, most of the time, is not paid for. It's free. It's on the house. You there, you bring other customers there. You bring other people there. So that's another thing that they don't talk about. Alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Klondike Mike is with us as well. I'm going to mute my line so I'm not dominating, but I know the painkillers and alcohol with Brett Favre, I have never heard him talked about in the same way that they talk about someone like Mike Tyson or Adam Pac-Man Jones. When I hear them referenced, it's always in a really disparaging way and what a screw-up this guy is and a total delinquent, and you wouldn't want him on your team. And Brett Favre, his last year in the league, he was under investigation for sexually harassing a female when he played with the Jets and addiction to pain. I mean, just all of this stuff. And they talked about him like he was the greatest thing ever. And we love Brett Favre. And cannot wait till we get to have his Hall of Fame induction. So, I mean, it's just that racism, white supremacy. Even when you got a lot of money and it looks like you're not being treated like a nigger, you are still a nigger on the plantation. I'll mute my line.
Right.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That was really amazing what you just told us there, other caller. I think that was the way you told that was really amazing. Like I was right there. I was going to say something slightly off topic, so I'll just say it really quickly. And I'm curious to one day maybe talk about because you mentioned something about how, if white people are doing one thing, then we should be distancing ourselves. And I think that's like such a confusing topic sometimes for me, especially because I feel like this is a way that they checkmate us in a lot of ways, is that like we don't know what of their stuff we should be, taking and making it into our own, and what stuff is like complete poison. Like, for example, like I feel like that's part of like the reason why we like feel like we have to follow these like certain archetypes to be black people. Like whereas they can just take anything they want, take everything from every culture, and they like refine themselves to this point where and we're like rejecting everything. And yeah, I was gonna say something like that, and something about violence and like. I'm saying I never like am condoning violence. I never like would say somebody should go do violence or whatever, but I definitely entertain the idea of violence. If you know what I mean, like I think it's still something worth discussing. And that's kind of a little subtle. I'm trying.
I think you're breaking up a little bit. I don't know if it's just me.
But anyway.
your line was breaking up a little bit. I heard the first part of what you were saying, and then when you were talking about violence and celebrating violence, and then it started to break up a little bit. If you want to say it one more time, if your line is clear, if you want to say it again.
Oh, okay. Okay. What you said about violence, but
still breaking up. Still breaking up.
I don't know.
You're breaking up pretty bad. Still breaking up pretty bad. I'm not sure.
I think that's it then, Gus. Thanks, though.
I was going to see about doing... I was going to try to respond. I couldn't make out the last part of it when you were talking about the violence.
No worries. Don't worry about the last part. If you can hear me, just whatever.
Okay, I can hear you now. Yeah, I don't know if you all want to touch on that, but I do think that's important in terms of just looking at the things that white people celebrate. I think it's important, things that they put a value on. I know in the beginning when I heard you and you were saying that earlier when I was talking about maybe looking at things that white people endorse, celebrate, put a high value on, and really looking at that and seeing whether or not that's something that we all should put a value on. I wouldn't say just across the board everything, because I think white people also put a value on logic, and I obviously wouldn't say that we should divorce ourselves from logic. And I think it's quite a few. I mean, you can't dominate without doing some things that are of value. So I wouldn't say abandon everything, but I definitely think there should be some serious analysis. I think there are a lot of things that are simply unjust, incorrect, and just complete insanity that white people endorse that have just become normalized because they're in charge. And when you're in a position of dominance, you set the rules. So even if you want to pick things and make them normal that are insane, that don't make sense, that are destructive, you can just make that normal. And once you've been doing it for a while, it just becomes something that people don't even think about. It just becomes second nature. It just becomes a part of the routine on the planet. And I think violence is one of those things that white people have just made it something to celebrate. And I think football and putting it in entertainment is one of the ways that they have made violence something that is so ubiquitous that we don't even think about it. It's just second nature. Somebody being hit, somebody being harmed, somebody being hurt, that's something to celebrate. That's not something we should question, well, wow, this person looks like they were harmed. Maybe that shouldn't have happened. No, that's something to cheer about. Even with what happened with RG3, that's how you end up with those sort of situations happening, where you have a young black male who ends up being harmed, and who knows how his career is going to go from there. I guess if you all want to respond to that, that's fine. I was also going to ask our caller in Cleveland about the role of religion, because I think that's another integral aspect of the whole sports culture, really the whole racist package in general, but I definitely think it's a big part of the sports culture. It reminded me of Ray Lewis and the Ravens, and I was pretty certain they were going to win the Super Bowl. When I saw them on television, I think it was very early in the play. It was super early. It was before it even looked like they could maybe get there. And he was saying, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. And that was kind of their chant for a while they were on the march to win the Super Bowl. And I just said, yep, white people are going to promote that big time. An image of a huge black male. He's one of the most famous black athletes in sports, or at least he's retired now, but right now one of the most popular, celebrated black athletes in sports. And him being all about Christianity and quoting scriptures. He was quoting Bible verses the whole way through. And I'm not picking on him. He's a victim of racism. I'm not picking on him, but I could see racists, that being something that we want to promote. We want to keep black people and Christianity. We want to keep promoting that image to make sure that black people, yes, be tied to Christianity. That will contaminate their thinking and make them easier for us to dominate and control on the plantation. I asked the caller, did Christianity, white Christianity, did that factor into your experience with athletics?
Oh, a major part. Early on in my life, I was went to a Catholic school, and the Lord's Prayer was was second nature. Before every Muni League game, before every high school game, before every college game, the Lord's Prayer is said. And Jesus, God, is with you as you walk out onto the field. They have now new Christian groups. I'm not sure the name of them, where they have high market, that's I can say, high market athletes, part of these organizations to talk about Christianity. And I asked one of the coaches one day, well, what if we have a child on the team that's Muslim? Do we do a salat to Allah? And a look of confusion and almost anger came over the face of the coach when I asked this question. Yes, Christianity is a cornerstone of an athlete who wants a good marketing career, who wants to do commercials, who wants to be on TV, doing maybe a journalist or ESPN broadcaster. Yes, you must be aligned with Jesus, and you must be a Christian. Other than that, you could look at Craig Hodges from the Chicago Bulls, who were a daishiki to the White House to meet, I believe it was Clinton or the Bushes. And the next year, no team in the NBA hired him. But in football, yes, sir, most definitely. If you have to be a Christian, and I give all glory to God is the first thing that should come out of your mouth before you give an interview, if you really want to move ahead in the system of white supremacy through broadcasting and journalism and endorsements. Yes, sir. I've pinpointed that, and I'm looking to change that somewhat and have people recognize the spirituality. And I've been asking little questions here and there to the coach about Christianity, but it's the Lord's Prayer said before every game. I think maybe for every team. So I never thought about that, but yeah, God is with you while you playing football. Jesus is with you while you playing football. Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. We had another caller. I was just referencing Anthony Pryor. He's been on the program repeatedly. His second book, I think it's his second book. He's written several books, so it's one of his later books. Black Horses, White Cotton and Religion, Sports, Slavery, and Religion, an Ongoing Phenomenon. We talked about that on his second visit on the program, where he goes into a lot of detail about that and how you could look to curry favor with white people by telling them you're going to Bible study. These are NFL athletes. This is not like Little League or anything like, not even at the college level, although I'm sure it's there too, but he was talking about NFL level. You could curry favor with coaches and, got your Bible in my locker and quoting the scriptures and telling them, I'm going to the prayer meeting, going to Bible meeting and participating in the prayers and all of that sort of thing. He talks about that extensively in that book, Black Horses, White Cotton and Religion, Sports, Slavery, and Religion, an Ongoing Phenomenon. And we talked about it when he was on the program the second time around. That was September of 2011, if memory serves. The caller at 1341, you should be with us as well.
Yeah, how you all doing? This is Terrell. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. And I was calling to say greetings to everybody, and I really appreciate the brother from Cleveland for being so honest. I used to do some semi-pro boxing myself in the 80s in the Detroit area, and I used to box with some local pros. But my experience was a little bit different because I really got into the game, not so much to be famous, but I just kind of wanted to. I grew up, in Catholic school and stuff. I just wanted to learn how to be brave. And all the bravest guys that I've ever seen that were athletes were fighters, They just seemed like they were able to hold it together under a lot of stress. And when I got good enough to where I could go to the local gyms and box with the best guys in the gym and not come out and come out in one piece, I felt like it made me a calmer person, and I could appreciate, peacefulness. It actually made me a calmer person. In fact, some of the calmest people I ever knew were those guys I used to box with. Because you could see those guys when they were just walking around the street, they were just, they were very calm. They were very good to people. And I just always admired that part about the character of the guys that I knew. And that kind of rubbed off on me. Like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that sport for the average person because it's so brutal. It takes a lot out of you in more ways than I can even begin to articulate. But if you can somehow, I think a good thing that all young black men should do at one point in their lives, they should study some kind of a martial art because it teaches you how to protect yourself, but also how to approach, but also how to be noble at the same time. I mean, you can use anything and abuse it, but my experience was it actually helped make me calmer and a lot more and brave internally against stress.
Can I be heard?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I'd like to say that I feel the same way somewhat. Like, I don't think that boxing for the entertainment of white people and making money necessarily is a good thing necessarily, depending on the person.
Right.
But I think, like, myself, I got into my first fight in my life the other, 2 weeks ago, and I kind of got my ass kicked, I gotta say. But I gotta tell you, like, I've decided I want to take martial arts, and I felt better about myself after that fight. I felt better about life because I knew that I could take some hits, and I can still move on. And I had less fear of death in me after that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I had that same experience, like when you spar for the first time, because I took a leather shampoo myself. Saw a couple of saints.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I know what you mean. But, like I said, I think there's a certain virtue to being able to endure. I don't necessarily think that it's good to endanger yourself, but that's just how I see it.
It's just me too. I'm somebody who is gets very nervous with confrontation at times, because I have always been a very peaceful person, and I've always been somebody who just softens things up in the room, right?
Right.
But then there's a lot of the times when you're a man and you get called out. You get called out in a room, and if you're a nervous type person, maybe a smaller guy or whatever, you just look like a fool all the times, and you got to be able to stick up for yourself, and if you know how to fight, then at least you can walk through the street and feel, a little safer about your situation. I'd rather die fighting than I'd rather put up a fight while I'm going down. Like, if something were to happen to me in the street, I'd rather die fighting than die being an idiot.
I kind of know what you mean. I mean, I know everybody doesn't agree with that. A lot of people say, "Hey, man, I don't like conflict. I don't want to, I don't like, be in them kind of situations." But I know what you mean. I just do. You really don't have to. I get it. I really do inherently get it. And I see every day where, especially if you got, where a lot of these young ladies that get jumped on. I think, if these young men had been raised in such a way where they could properly, understand what it means to be a young man, how to defend themselves and defend their family and their loved ones, a lot of this mess wouldn't be going on like this, and they wouldn't be the way that they are. And it wouldn't be all of this, this aggressive, over braggadocious type of stuff. Because once you get to a certain level in your practice and in your study, you don't need to go through any of that bravado. You just know. Because your discipline is at that point, and your mind is at that point.
We have done our 3 hours. We were on an hour earlier. I know some people tuned in at the normal time, but we started at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific today, so we have done our 3. We should be back. Enjoy the dialogue from all of the. See, we got people calling in right now. Might give them 30 seconds if they want to share, because I know people are accustomed to us being on at the normal time. I was going to say briefly, I don't know if people are familiar with Phoenix Jones, MMA fighter. He's a black male. But Bruce Klein, she mailed me a video from like the end of 2012. He's in Seattle area. And I'd seen him before. People had mailed me about him before because he was with this group of mostly white people here in Seattle, of course. And they would dress up as superheroes and go around and, try to do some sort of, I don't want to say vigilante, but they would get involved. If they saw people doing incorrect things, they would get involved. And the police got called sometimes. They got in trouble for this at some points because white people said that they were involving themselves in things where they should not have, that they're not the police officers and they shouldn't be interfering, basically. Anyway, at the end of 2012, he was with his group. They were out doing their own thing, and these racists, and I'm calling them racist because they called Phoenix a nigger in the video. So anyway, so these racists, they come up accosting them, name calling, blah, 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 talking all this stuff. Phoenix and his entourage, he was with several people, they tried to leave repeatedly. They kept trying to walk away, and these white guys, they just kept yelling, blah, 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 all that. The police eventually get called. I didn't know this until down the road in Washington State. They have what is called mutual combat law, where if there's 2 adults and they decide that they want to fight, they can fight and no one will be arrested, even if the police are present, according to the way the white people have written it. And this is, that's just crazy in my view. That is just straight racism, white supremacy in terms of their love of violence. Like, I cannot imagine having a law written like that in a system of justice where it's 2 people that decide they're going to fight, the police are there, and no problem, have at it, have fun. Anyway, so they eventually, the white person, he keeps pestering Phoenix Jones, and, Phoenix finally turns around and says, fine, let's fight. They have mutual combat. You and I will agree to fight. And so the police are there, and they hear this, and like, oh, okay, well, if y'all are going to fight, have at it, just don't get in the street, and the police sit back. And so they start, all of this is on video. You can watch this. They begin to fight. The white guy found out the hard way that Phoenix has MMA skills, and things do not go his way, which only further infuriates the white people when they get stomped out by this well-trained black guy. But, yeah, that can big time come in handy. The person that called it, I'm just doing this because we were on at an earlier time today. We should have been on a little bit later. If you had something you briefly wanted to add as we wrap up, I do mean brief, like a couple sentences that you wanted to add in. The person that called at 2658, did you have something quickly you wanted to share?
No, sir. I'll just archive this show and listen to it at my own time. Thank you.
Right on. Archive should be up. Give me an hour. It should be available. iTunes and the other sites should be able to get the podcast in its entirety. I hope it was constructive. I was not able to get the sound clip. I will see if I can quickly get the name of the study that the folks conducted with regards to Robert Griffin and what happened with the Redskins during the playoff game. As I said, I got that from Mr. Scotty Reed. He was the one that informed me about this study being done in the first place. One of the white people who participated in the study, her name is Sophie Trawalter, Trawalter. Sophie Trawalter. Again, that's her name, and she's at my alma mater, University of Virginia. Racist suspect, nonetheless. Anyway, and the name of the study is, I will see if I can get that for you as well before we wrap things up. If it takes more than 30 seconds, you'll just have to email me about it if you're really interested in getting this study. See if I can track it down. Athletic performance. Looks like it might take more than 30 seconds. You have to email me. I've talked about it before, and I read it in this. I was going to play it in the sound clip, but the clips just stopped working for some reason. At any rate, Black Talk Radio Network founder, Mr. Scotty Reed. Thanks for the efforts, and we will be back later in the week. Hope the broadcast was of constructive value. I would again encourage folks to check out the documentary film that talked about the history of racism in the NFL. I just didn't know the name of it. Got some sound clips from that as well because I thought it was phenomenal. You get to hear from Bobby Mitchell and some of the other players and some of the ridiculous things, things that white people did to them when they were playing, and just you get to hear it directly from them. I think it's always better when you can just hear right from the folks. The website for the film is thirdandlong.tv, and the name of the documentary is Third and Long, The History of African Americans in Pro Football, 1946 to 1989. And I thought it was fantastic, and I didn't even see the whole thing. I only saw about half of it, on mute no less. I didn't even get to hear it, so I would encourage checking it out. I thought it had some great information, and you'll get to see our guest from today's program, Dr. Thomas G. Smith. He's in there as well, talking about some of the info that we touched on today. We will be back later in the week. Justice's blog, justdojustice.blogspot.com. justdojustice.blogspot.com, and my blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com, racism-notes.blogspot.com. Again, the goal, seeing if we can get $1,000 for the month of March, listener supported. If George Zimmerman can get almost $500,000 for killing a black male, we should easily be able to clear $1,000. That is nickels on the plantation. We will be back later in the week. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Anybody want to do our prayer to wrap things up?
I'll do it.
Ruby. Thanks, everybody, for calling. Thoroughly enjoyed hearing the exchange of views. To the caller in Cleveland, I'm going to contact Mr. Thomas again. You sharing reminded me. I'm going to see if he would be down to come, because everything that you touched on, he talks about in his documentary film. I think you would enjoy it. I think you would enjoy hearing more of what he has to say. I'm going to see if I can get him in the next 24 hours. See if we can get a date and time to get him on the program this month. I'm sure if you have the time, if you think it would be a constructive investment of your time and energy to be able to exchange a few words with him, if we can get him on the program. Even if we can't, I'm sure he would enjoy speaking with you and hearing more of the details, because it sounds like his movie is your experience. Just based on what you shared, I think you would really enjoy it. Thank you again for sharing. Thoroughly appreciate it, and hope the broadcast was constructive. Call in the Bronx, take things away.
Right. Thou who art blacker than a trillion midnights, whose eyes shine brighter than a billion suns, thou whose hair doth coil tighter than a million springs, radiating all energy throughout the universe. We beseech thee, one and only one, to give us total strength to carry out thy will for the universe, to establish justice on planet Earth and live in peace. Ashe.
Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe. The study, there are actually several. I'll just do it later. The study with Ms. Trotwalter, I found it. I'll just put it on my Facebook page. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Context of White Supremacy, signing out.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. No problem. You're a victim. Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Mm-hmm. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.